Senator the Honorable Hassel Bacchus, Minister of Digital Transformation, Mr. Vince Cerf, Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist, Google Incorporated, Ms. Henriette Esther-Hussein, outgoing Chair, United Nations Internet Governance Forum, Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, distinguished speakers and panelists, fellow TTIGF directors, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you. My name is Anita Sohan. I am the current chair of the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, or TTIGF. On behalf of the TTIGF, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual meeting of the 6th Annual Trinidad and Tobago Internet Governance Forum, or TTIGF for short. Just to give a quick overview of who we are, TTIGF is an independent entity for the promotion and development of best practice policy standards for the .tt country code top-level domain and the internet ecosystem in the interest of the internet community. We are represented by stakeholders belonging to government, internet users, academia, technical community, civil society, and business. Through the hosting of the TTIGF, the TTIGF has sought to address topics of relevance through transparent and inclusive discussions. This year, our discussions will be centered around the theme, the future of the internet. What's next? We found that it was necessary to have conversations aligned to this topic as we enter into the third year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Like most events before the pandemic, TTIGF was traditionally held as an in-person or hybrid event. Now, for the second year, we have a purely virtual meeting due to current global circumstances. That being said, we cannot deny the power of digital technologies to safely enable work, study, and social activities. However, while we are now more than ever reliant on technology and on the internet for daily activities, COVID-19 has compounded existing development challenges. It has magnified the digital divide and the difficulties faced in moving towards a digital environment. So, over the next 2 days, we have 4 sessions with expert panelists discussing the following internet governance issues. Today, after our formal opening, we go into panel 1, which is building a digitally competent society. This session will pay particular attention to the need for the inclusion and integration of 21st century competency programs in our school's curriculum to produce lifelong learners who will excel through efficient and effective use of existing and emerging digital technologies in a safe and ethical manner. For our second panel, we know that data is important when it comes to policy creation, but yet we find that as a country and as a region, there's a need for us to improve research and data collection in order to effectively drive development initiatives relating to internet access, affordability, and infrastructure. This panel therefore looks at enhancing internet research, data, and measurement for development. Tomorrow, we begin our third panel session entitled The Internet and the Law, where we will discuss how the internet is regulated locally and regionally with a close examination of the modes of regulation. Our last panel explores Trinidad and Tobago's digital transformation journey. What's next? Here, we will discuss the role of the private sector, academia, technical community, and civil society alongside the government to support and drive digital transformation efforts. We will then follow with a feature address by one of the fathers of the internet, Mr. Vince Cerf, something I'm certain we're all looking forward to. This address will set the tone for the open forum where we want to hear your thoughts on what you deem to be most pressing internet and digital policy issues. I want to encourage all of you to participate in these discussions, challenge yourself as well as others, and use this platform to foster innovation, collaboration, and change over the next 2 days. I also encourage you to join the TTIGF, help shape the IGF, and enhance our local voices in the internet governance discussions locally and globally. Our TTIGF outputs are usually shared with regional IGFs within the Caribbean and Latin America, as well as the global IGF. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot end my remarks without thanking and acknowledging our partners who have helped make TTIGF happen this year, including Trinidad and Tobago Network Information Center, the Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers, and the Internet Governance Forum Secretariat. Thank you to each of you as well for being part of our program. And I wish us a positive and fruitful discussion as we all have a role to play in shaping the internet. I will now introduce Mr. Vince Cerf. Vince is given a pre-recorded video message today. He will be on live tomorrow. But to roll into his message, Mr. Vinton Cerf is the Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. He contributes to global policy development and is the continued spread of the internet. Widely known as one of the fathers of the internet, Mr. Cerf is the co-designer of the TCP/IP protocols and the architecture of the internet. He has served in executive positions at the MCI, the Corporation for National Research Initiatives, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects agencies on the faculty of Stanford University. Mr. Cerf will be giving us an introductory keynote address.
Hello, my name is Vince Cerf. I'm Google's Chief Internet Evangelist, and it's a real pleasure to have a chance to chat with you. I wish it could be face-to-face, but unfortunately in these pandemic times, travel is hard to come by. I understand that you'll be meeting to discuss internet-related matters. In particular, I hope you'll be talking about the importance of infrastructure and investment in that, whether that's undersea cables or satellite-based communications or 5G mobile tower investment or tower interconnects with underlying fiber or fiber to the home or any of a variety of different ways of achieving internet connectivity, all of which in theory has the benefit of improving people's ability to make use of a global information resource and a system that allows for a wide range of applications, ranging from e-commerce and sharing photos with friends and blizzards of email, creating websites that support businesses, providing government services and education, especially in the midst of all the various closures that the pandemic has forced on us. So infrastructure is a really important investment target. And of course, it raises all kinds of questions about where the money is going to come from. Does it come from the government? Is it a tax-based thing? Is it a business model where individuals and corporations pay for access to the internet and underwrite the cost of its implementation and operation? Might there be community networks created by essentially creating cooperatives? Or might it be simply a question of competitive offerings from a variety of service providers? Of course, there might be cases where the density of the users is lower than would be supported by having competitive offerings, in which case you may need a regulatory stance in order to make sure that the pricing structure is fair in the case of a monopoly provider. I'm sure that all of these things are part of the conversation that you'll be involved in. I want to emphasize several things. The first one is that it's important not to be left out. Internet, despite all of the hazards that we now understand it can pose, things like misinformation, disinformation, bullying, ransomware, denial of service attacks, it's a very long list of potential hazards in the internet, and that's driving a lot of policy development in countries around the world and in international forums. But I think over the past roughly 40 years of its operation, the internet has also demonstrated an enormous capacity for utility. And I think we don't want to either underestimate the value of all that or underestimate the risk that some of the policy proposals might have to fragment the network and to make it much less interoperable and transparent and freely accessible. There are good reasons for countries to be concerned about the safety and security and privacy of its citizens in this online environment. But at the same time, it's vital that we keep an open, interoperable network so that data centers, for example, can move data from one place to another freely in order to replicate the data and make sure nothing ever gets lost. or can distribute information in content distribution networks so that users of the streaming content or of the local web pages can get rapid response and reduce the load on the core of the network and the backbone so that it is not necessary to keep streaming the same information multiple times to parties that are remote from the source. So there are all kinds of reasons to want to make sure that the internet is stable and continues to be accessible and sustainable and affordable and safe and secure and maintains privacy. What this suggests to me is that we are going to need global cooperation, international cooperation, in order to improve the level of safety and security in the network. The network was designed essentially to be widely accessible on a global scale. Remember, it was originally designed to be part of the command and control system of the US military, which has to operate everywhere in the world. The thing is that once you introduce this sort of global artifact, you get all of the challenges that you get with shared atmosphere and shared oceans. Pollution becomes a problem in both of those instances. And we have to find ways of agreeing on a global scale, on an international basis, how to respond to some of those potential harms. The same is true in the internet. Law enforcement needs, for example, to track people down and hold them accountable if they're doing harmful things to people who are across other international boundaries, for example. So these are the kinds of things that I hope that you'll be talking about. Please don't leave out things like online education, training for people either to build and operate pieces of internet or to build on top of it new businesses, provide government services to people who might otherwise have nothing. Or no access to those services. There's just so much work to be done still to bring the other half of the world online in a safe and secure fashion. So I'm looking to you to have those discussions, to come up with interesting ideas and share them widely, particularly in the international internet governance meetings that occur on an annual basis. We've just concluded one in Poland, as I'm sure many of you know. So the next one comes around in a year's time, and I hope that the results of your deliberations will be reflected in the topics that we consider for the annual IGF in 2022. Again, I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I suspect we might cross paths on the net.
Next up, we hear from Ms. Henriette Esterhuisen, the outgoing chair of the UN IGF MAG. Ms. Esterhuisen is the outgoing chairperson, having served in this role from December 2019 to December 2021. Previously, she was the executive director of the Association for Progressive Communications, the largest ICT-focused civil society network in the world, and continues to work with the ACP as a senior advisor on internet governance. She is the convener of African School on Internet Governance, a joint initiative of the APC, the African Union Commission and Research ICT Africa. Henriette was inducted into the Internet Hall of Fame as a Global Connector in 2013 for her work in extending internet connectivity in Africa. Henriette currently serves as the Commissioner on the Global Commission for Stability and Cyberspace and on boards of Connect Humanity and of the .ca of South Africa domain name authorities. Over to Henriette. Bear with us 1 minute as we just get this sorted.
Should be doing, and we should be doing it with both a global lens or through a global lens as well as through a national and a local lens. And I think that's precisely what you are doing. We know that the internet adds value. We know that it is not equitably available to everyone. We know that the openness, the publicness of the internet is under threat, a threat in many different ways. So how do we respond? How do we tackle this challenge, and how do we shape the future of the internet? How can we be more than just spectators? I think the way to approach it is precisely as you are doing. And that is, as we say, there's an old African saying, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is mouthful by mouthful. And I think that is what you are doing. You're looking at digital literacy and online schooling. You're looking at a very specific challenge and opportunity that the internet presents. Then you're also looking at enhancing internet research, data measurement for development. And that is so important. Being able to have data that is meaningful to you at a local level in terms of policy making, implementation, business opportunity, and human rights perspectives. This is data that is necessary for all stakeholder groups, for government, business, civil society, and the technical community. And in fact, looking at the UNESCO Internet Universality Indicators is something I would strongly recommend that you do. It is a set of indicators that have been developed precisely for multi-stakeholder national assessments. Perhaps you've already been aware of that, or you've seen that they've been used. I know there are several countries in the Latin America and Caribbean region who have looked at that. Then thirdly, you're looking at the internet and law, and that touches on regulation. And I think this is one of the great challenges we're facing at the moment. How do we create a regulatory environment for the internet that creates opportunity globally and locally, that challenges the dominance of just a few large monopolies, and that spreads the opportunity for innovation more equitably, that lowers barriers to entry without becoming overly restrictive. And then finally, you're looking at Trinidad and Tobago's digital transformation journey. And I think this is ultimately really how we need to look at the future. You need to look at what it means in your context. What have you achieved? What do you still need to achieve? Where are the fault lines? Are there fault lines? Who's excluded? That should not be excluded. How can you strengthen your own processes towards more sustainable development, better democracy, more accountable government, and a better society? And I think that really is ultimately what we want to try and do with the internet. And I think that's the challenge and the opportunity that the national IGFs present to us. And I think what makes them so rich is that we don't just look at that question of how do we approach the digital transformation journey and what's next through the perspective of one stakeholder group. By coming together as different stakeholder groups, we are forced to be more open, to be more multidimensional, to look at business opportunity as well as human rights impact, to look at accountability of government as well as responsibility of companies. And I think that is what you are doing. And I commend you for it. You've got a long journey that you've already followed, and you've achieved so much. So I look forward to looking at the outcome of your event and to hopefully visiting Trinidad and Tobago one of these days. And please, as always, maintain your participation in IGF processes. The involvement of people in your community in the Small Island Developing State Dynamic Coalition, in the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and in IGF events globally really, really adds value. I think you should never underestimate what depth there is in your experience and your journey, and how much it means to others, particularly in the Global South, but not only when you share that experience. All the best, and see you online.
Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator the Honorable Hazel Bacchus, Minister of Digital Transformation. Senator the Honorable Hazel Bacchus was appointed as a senator and minister in the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation on August 19, 2020. In 2021, the Ministry of Digital Transformation was made a standalone ministry with Senator Bacchus at the helm. Senator Bacchus is the holder of AAS Electronics Engineering Technology from the University of the District of Columbia. On a personal and professional level, he is self-motivated, goal-oriented, creative, experienced telecom technology leader with a proven track record across multiple IT and telecom managerial and operational environments. He understands and is at ease working within all levels of a corporation. Senator Bacchus possesses an in-depth knowledge of service provider deployment, fulfillment, and assurances, track record in developing new operational areas and ensuring functional integrity, detailed understanding of IT solutions, legacy and next generation switching and transport networks in both wired and wireless core and access spheres, proficient in creating and evaluating business documents with the ability to understand and negotiate with a focus on value and customer service. Senator Bacchus's passion for educating and sharing is at the heart of his work. Welcome, Senator Bacchus.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Anita, for the warm welcome. Let me express my pleasure at being here, being able to join this gathering today. I heard Vinton, and I've seen him at a number of forums in a number of places, so I expect that you will have a really, really, really good event. You know, the theme that the TTIGF has, you know, the future of internet, what next, I think is quite appropriate, you know, since the technology has allowed us to navigate the upheavals that we've had in COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, think about it, I'm leveraging that technology today. I am at my home doing this, and shortly after I'll be switching gears and going into another major meeting. Of course, every one of the presenters before has said, you know, they want to get to Trinidad. That's the one thing the technology hasn't been able to get us to do yet, which is be remote and yet still enjoy the beauties that Trinidad and Tobago has. But nonetheless, you know, it's really my pleasure to be here and using the same technology of which this conference is all about. The reality of it is that most of us at the Ministry of Digital Transformation have really been working from home since the establishment in July of last year. And, you know, it's been to our advantage to do so. I mean, those things are well documented. I think one of our team members was telling me the other day about how much it has improved our productivity, for example. You know, working from home saves up 3 hours of commuting time, the energy and so on that he would waste in sitting in a car to get there. And then, of course, she has some additional hours per day with her family. So while allowing her to contribute, you know, an extra hour at work and all of that, she still has more time to be with her family. So it's a real win-win situation. And I think, and obviously I know the internet has a lot to do with that. Today, I want to focus a bit, at least this morning, I want to focus a bit and share the plan or the vision of digital transformation, discuss the approach that we are taking here in the ministry and our work program. And I want to touch briefly on some of the issues which we're confronting, as this obviously is of interest to TTIGF. I heard been talk about some of it already. So let's start with maybe the challenges about continuity and the struggles that we have as a government to get what we want to get, you know, where we want to go. Coming from a long career in the private sector, and I don't want to date myself, but saying over 30 years in it, you know, I found myself on a very steep learning curve when I joined the government in 2020. And you have to understand how the public service is configured and designed around these concepts of community and predictability. And that's a good thing, because at its best, you know, the public sector plays an important role in maintaining stability, of course, as it maintains the confidence of citizens and societal stakeholders. But the downside of that is that the public sector excels at maintaining the status quo. It's not so well equipped to embrace the game-changing disruptions that comes with transformation, especially if you're talking about the digital form of transformation. So, to deal with that, the approach requires systems built on the principles of agility, flexibility, fail fast, learn fast, start over, do it again, have, people critiquing their own work for the better of it, which is not something that, culturally we are accustomed to. And these are challenging for people who are conflicted, because when I think about it, the necessity to adhere to the rules and, the processes bound that set the public service regulations. So, I'm saying that not as a criticism of the hardworking and well-intentioned officers who serve the country faithfully, but rather it sets a kind of context, to understand why the government sometimes has struggled with the implementation of ICT initiatives in the past, and why the lessons learned from that need to be applied. And I'm sure you will get into some of that as you go along in the conference. Then, of course, in comes the COVID-19 pandemic. So the pandemic has been a game changer, of course, for everybody. It significantly advanced the process of digital transformation worldwide, which has been one of its side effects. Trinidad and Tobago, for example, is able to participate in this new digital age, despite the many gaps in our national ICT infrastructure, but we're still able to do so. It's interesting that the increased reliance on broadband has caused us to re-examine many definitions of our common use. So think about this. In terms of underserved communities, previously that would have been, fairly rural areas outside of the coverage area for wireless. It's too expensive to run fiber up there and so on. And so you have to find these areas and do it. But in the new, and they would be called, underserved or unserved communities. But think about this now. In the new era, where families, you require high-speed internet for work, like I am doing now, kids need it for school, leisure, religious ceremonies, we do them online, conferences. So underserved communities now could be anywhere, because it's built around not just the fact that you're in coverage, you have coverage issues, but even areas where coverage and all of that is there, and you have capacity, capability, and suitability issues. So therefore, it's really difficult. So what's something in urban areas where you had proper coverage and so on, because of the changes in the way in which consumers are utilizing the product, areas that were previously considered quite well are now also underserved. So when you look at that, you can't continue to define today's requirements and yesterday's experiences. It have to be more real time, they have to be more up to date. And of course, the Telecommunications Authority is currently in the final stages of its digital inclusion survey, and that will help further define some of these issues. As far as transformation is concerned, we're dealing with the digital transformation is structured really around 3 central pillars. And again, I'm sure they will come up during your conversations and debate. Digital society, digital economy, and digital government. 3 central pillars: digital society, digital economy, digital government. Digital society is about ensuring that everyone has access to affordable ICT stuff, broadband, etc. It involves the creating of the appropriate environment for technology that is robust, it must be reliable, it builds on the skills and so on needed for our citizens so that they can realize the greatest benefits from digital technology. So it's not just about the equipment, but think about it, you also have to increase the digital IQ of the entire society to be able to take advantage of what you have. The importance of this particular digital society pillar was kind of underscored by the Minister of Finance when he did the budget presentation last year, when he declared broadband as a public good. And that declaration, I think, carries a lot of weight with it, because it has and shows the importance of which broadband and in the internet is being placed relative to how society has to function. Through digital economy pillar, we aim to double the contribution of the ICT sector to the national GDP. It's currently about 4%, we want to get it to about 8%. And there are fiscal measures and incentives that will contribute to that. The business sector will be aware of it. I believe, however, that the key to us being able to achieve this is the ability for the private sector and the government to work collaboratively and in sync, and to deal with things like, for example, under the National Economic Recovery Plan. This is really, really important. The collaboration and partnership aspect of what we have to do is really an underlying pillar of how this is going to be achieved. Because as we co-design our future, guiding principles that at least I have set in the ministry, for example, is made by TNT for TNT and the world. We do have the talent, we have all the things that we need, is really to get the necessary infrastructure and pieces to that, ecosystems to that, to get our own people to start to develop and push things forward that will contribute to this digital economy. There are other aspects to this. For example, hyperscale data centers, etc., but we'll deal with those at a different time. A key initiative, for example, we're dealing with this is the Developers Hub. We plan to launch this in the second quarter of 2022, but it will bring together, for example, young entrepreneurs and innovators from all over Trinidad and Tobago to develop apps and so on that will make use of the public data that we have. And of course, the plan is to have that improve the delivery of services to citizens, but also build things that could be exported into the worldwide, as we say. It is made by TNT, for TNT, and the world. Digital government. Well, this includes several bodies of work. Digital government, the digitization of government records and information is obviously one that we have to do. It's going on right now across a number of ministries and so on. A lot of the information on that will aid in the creation of services, end-to-end services that of course will be available via websites and so on. The digitalization of business processes through the adoption of appropriate digital technology, of course, is another key one. And the plan is to facilitate the coordination and harmonization of these efforts to reduce unnecessary duplication and achieve economies of scale. So, you want to enter information once, reuse it as many times as possible, be able to conduct all your business, in one place, no wrong door, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well aware of a number of the things that go along with that. And of course, we want to take the necessary steps towards the creation of the enabling environment needed for digital transformation. Two of the elements that you need for this environment will be, digital literacy and legislation, and both of those are on your agenda, I recognize, for discussion while you're having this particular intervention. Also high on our agenda, of course, is the question of security. And this is not just about the protection and enforcement of considerations addressed by national security colleagues, but the task of building trust and confidence in customers that digital technology, especially the internet, for example, is safe and reliable. This is something that cannot be understated. I think unless we are able to get the users, the customers of our systems to build the trust that is required for them to be able to use it with confidence, we're going to be on a really slippery slope in terms of adoption of what we're trying to do. Really, really, really important. Of course, the importance of partnership. The success of digital transformation efforts requires contribution and the involvement of all, the civil society, the private sector, government. And of course, we'll seek to build out those relationships as we do that with everybody. So as we engage with you and all the other groups, we are mindful that we're also engaging with potential partners. This particular cohort is no different. And of course, despite our relative newness as a ministry, we're encouraged by the willingness and of others to partner and to help us. This trend has given rise, I have tremendous optimism about the perspectives for success. We have, for example, several local industry experts who have donated freely of their time, and I mean really, really serious technical people in a number of spheres, donated their time to the ministry to help us review projects and plan for future ones. An example, the business community, the immediate response to the government's need for assistance when we were working on the COVID vaccination, but more so specifically on the IT side. In updating and validating the vaccination database, we needed help with that. The private sector stepped in to give us a hand, and again, at their own cost. Our partnership with the Trinidad and Tobago Adult Literacy Tutors Association, ALTA, which has its own, by the way, online program for what it's doing with its customers and participants. But it is partnered with us to be able to deliver that through our access centers. The assistance from the UNDP, and this is another significant one, again, maybe you'll discuss it later as you debate, the conduct of the digital assessment, readiness assessment of Trinidad and Tobago. We plan to finish this and have the report completed by the end of March, but this will assist in understanding our current state and identifying some of the existing gaps. It's not the only study that we have others, and I did mention the inclusion survey from TAC, but we have a number of initiatives on that so that we can really closely and empirically define where we are in terms of our readiness for some of the digital things that we want to do. We don't want to outrun our headlights, as I say, which is go too fast and then leave people behind. And since we're on the topic of partnerships, of course, I want to invite everybody here today to partner with us. The internet is one of the most critical enablers for digital transformation, and your input is required, especially as we move to address some of the pressing challenges of internet governance facing Trinidad and Tobago, and we will have to address them. Internet issues. So think about Trinidad and Tobago where it is. Since early 2000s, a perennial issue for Trinidad and Tobago for the internet service has been the risk to the country because, and again, it was mentioned by Vin, submarine cables. We have a single landing point that obviously contributes to a single point of failure. It's not the ideal thing. And then Tobago is even worse because Tobago, our sister isle, is dependent on a single submarine cable from Trinidad. So think about the disruptions that can happen when you're working in that scenario and you are that dependent on what we have already described as a public good being brought back. So we have ways that we're going to improve on that. But think about this. Think about the fragility of this. And let me just jar your memory back a little bit. Last September, I think it was during the budget presentation, people called me, think I had some impact on this so that people had something else to do. But there was an issue in South Florida. I think it pertained with a boat and an anchor with some cables. And then there was a power failure in the Northern Antilles. That combined thing, nothing happened in Trinidad, severely impaired the internet services in the country. I mean, people were calling, trying to figure out what had happened. Nothing happened in Trinidad. But what it meant is that we had significant restrictions on our broadband capabilities to the external world for things that had nothing to do with us here in Trinidad. And of course, we have to find ways to do better with that. So what do we need to do? We probably need to establish different landing points here. We need to have alternate cables and routes going to different places. You would have seen that the last underwater volcano knocked out the communications entirely to one nation. We have our own underwater volcano here in the Caribbean in Kikamjeni. So any of those cables that traverse the western side of the Caribbean archipelago susceptible to that, and we've had damage from that in the past. How do we mitigate against some of that? Well, think about it. We really should have a lot more on-island processing. A lot of governments and private sector, for example, are processing of data and critical stuff and delivery for things for citizens exists offshore. They live in Azure stacks and AWS stacks all over the world. But think about what happens when you get cut off or resource restricted from those things. All of a sudden, all of what you're trying to do seems very, very difficult. So what we're going to try to do, of course, is to see if we can welcome some of those people. And I know we have people speaking, I think, from Microsoft and maybe Google and so on here. But think about it. All of these major international enterprise cloud providers, Azure, AWS as examples, and so on, they really don't have major instances, certainly not in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Can we improve on that? Should we not bring those stacks here, not just to help in terms of having things on island, but more so in terms of providing that at a larger scale to our young entrepreneurs and people who want to avail themselves of that. The other thing, of course, Trinidad and Tobago is blessed is that we have several tier 3 certified data centers on island, 4 I could think of. And how do we leverage those and use the XaaS components of what they have to accelerate what we're trying to do here in terms of the delivery times and so on, without having to purchase your infrastructure, get to where you have to do all of that sits here already. And if the type of data and so on and the type of thing that you want to do is amenable to using those XaaS services, we have the infrastructure here already. The question is how best can we explore this? And finally, of course, government ministries and agencies collectively own significant infrastructure already. There are a number of distributed virtual environments all over the government and in the private sector. Could we not leverage that to create a distributed government cloud? What are the issues with pursuing that kind of option and suggestions and so on? These are just things that I'm throwing out that may be part of what you want to do or what you can discuss during the conference. The other thing, the last thing I want to talk is just about the internet governance agencies. Is an area in which we would obviously welcome your assistance as the TTIGF, in that how can you help us get the best of our relationships with regional and international governance agencies? The Ministry of Digital Transformation is currently engaging with the CTU, with LACNIC. We're about to recommence engagements with ICANN. And so your views on these issues and what needs to be addressed, and in your opinion, what should be addressed with those agencies and by those agencies, that type of information would be most welcome. So as I close, ladies and gentlemen, all viewers all over, I believe that the issues that will be discussed at this 2022 TTIGF are important, I think, and they have great interest to the ministry, especially the ministry that I run, but I think they should be of great interest to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The ministry is a small organization, and we've been able to attract talented, committed, very resourceful individuals who have been working tirelessly to enable our progress, and I want to publicly thank them, and I'm very grateful for them. But really, we await the outcomes of your discussions, and we'll follow this very closely and carefully, and look forward to collaborating with you on, on internet governance and other things that will come out here, and other critical digital transformation matters in the days ahead. So with that said, I thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Minister. That was quite informative and very excellent speech. I know Cabinet is usually on a Thursday, but I do hope if you have some time, feel free to stay along and even join us tomorrow. Some excellent points concerning partnerships. TTIGF, TTIGF, we welcome that. And I love what you said about the 3 pillars of the ministry focusing on building a digital society, digital economy, and digital government. Digital society in particular, where you mentioned increasing the digital IQ for everyone to take advantage of what we have. That leads quite nicely into our first panel session of the day, which is building a digitally competent society. So I will introduce our moderator for this session, who will then introduce his panelists and take you right into the session. So Sanjay Bahadur Singh is a professionally registered electrical engineer with a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Manchester, UK. He is a senior lecturer in energy systems, as well as the head of department of electrical and computer engineering at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. He continues to serve as a trustee on the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, the co-chairman of the Specification Committee for Electric and Plug-in Hybrid Vehicles at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. He is the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards National Technical Committee Electrical Codes. He is a senior member of the IEEE and former chairman of the IEEE Trinidad and Tobago section. He is a director and former chairman of the TTIGF. Over to you, Sanjay.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning. Thank you to former speakers, particularly to our minister who has highlighted those 3 pillars, which I believe will be very instrumental in this session this morning. This first panel session is entitled Building a Digitally Competent Society. And as the minister would have alluded to, there are a lot of aspects involved here, particularly with raising our digital IQ and our literacy. So the panel brief, as defined on the agenda, is that COVID-19 has brought up the timeline for the predictions of a connected world via the internet. And we all recognize that it has happened, and it has happened very quickly. So now internet technologies play a more critical role for everyone in work, school, and entertainment, sometimes at the same location. So now we have challenges to address. We need to recognize that we have some people who are not yet ready and are unable to work with this technology, whether it be technophobias, but we must ensure that everyone can move forward, and we have to bridge the gap, whether it be an infrastructural gap of the digital divide or a competency gap, which is growing larger, and we need to address this. So there's a need and an inclusion for the integration of 21st century competency programs in our schools' curriculums, and that we can produce lifelong learners and therefore excel through the efficient and effective use of this existing and emerging digital technologies to move us and prepare us to contribute to that digital economy. And that's exactly what this first panel is about. And this panel, we are very happy to have a star-studded team here with me this morning. And we have Pandit Shiva Maharaj, we have Dr. Birbal, we have Mr. and Mrs. Bola, Mr. Darren Mohammed, and Mr. Swasti Maharaj. So what I'm going to do, now I'm going to read the bios of my distinguished panel, and then I will ask them to introduce themselves, just exchange pleasantries with myself and you, the audience, before we get into the actual panel discussion. So our first panelist this morning, we have Pandit Shiva Maharaj. Pandit Shiva is also known as the digital guru and is a local pioneer in educational technology, digital literacy, and digital citizenship. He was recognized in a 2-page Ministry of Education publication for over 2 decades, influencing and shaping educational technology integration in primary and secondary schools throughout our beloved Twin Island state. His latest innovation in response to the pandemic has been the Digital Guru Class Tab PC, which is an affordable, optimized, out-of-the-box, complete online education system for students particularly those in the rural areas. Pandit Maharaj graduated as part of the first cohort with a Master of Arts in Leadership in Technical Vocation Education and Training and Workforce Development from the UWI and attained a Bachelor's of Education degree from the UTT. He has also accumulated numerous international industry-based qualifications, certifications in telecommunications, information technology, computer studies, and he continues to share and disseminate this knowledge to students as young as 5 years of age that attend his annual boot camps, which celebrated 10 years in 2021. So congrats to you, Pandit Shiva. This is very interesting. And of course, his website is digitalguru.tips. He has been advocating for 21st century competencies such as mobile literacy, digital citizenship, and use cybersecurity. On a global scale, he and his company, the ICT Experts Limited, has represented Trinidad and Tobago at the Safer Internet Day Committee and championed for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month and data privacy. He has also presented many scholarly papers and presentations. So welcome to you, Pandit Shiva.
Good day, Sanjay, and it is indeed a pleasure, and thank you all and the organizers of this forum for having me once again. I was here last year in terms of how we were to integrate technology into education, and now we're taking it a step further. So I congratulate the organization on evolving the discussions as we go more into the pandemic, as you said, as we would have heard from all our speakers before us, that it has indeed put that trust into us to move forward in ways and as a catalyst to accomplish things that many of us here would have been working towards, and we would have think that would have been quite down the road, but here we are. And as we get into our little introductions to ourselves, as you would have read there, that, my master's was in technical vocational education and training. And last year I would have focused on competencies being a mix of knowledge, skills, and attitude. But however, as we are speaking about lifelong learners, within that period to now, I have continued my education and training. And so my particular definition of competencies and 21st century skills have been, constantly evolving and changing. Yes.
Let me put a pin in that there. Let me introduce the others, and then we come back and pick up on that. Yeah, but I
no
love
problem. Oh yeah,
lovely.
No problem.
So thank you, Pandit Shiva. So next on our cast this morning, we have Dr. Birbal. Dr. Birbal is an assistant professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. He currently holds a doctorate and master's degree in educational technology from the University of Sheffield, postgraduate diploma in educational technology at UWI, and a postgraduate diploma in teaching of maths at UWI, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Maths from UWI, and a certificate in technology integration from Thompson River University, Canada. He has been a teacher lecturer for the past 35 years. 20 of years has been at a tertiary level and 15 years teaching at a secondary school. He currently teaches educational technology, instructional design, learning management systems, web design and development, and several other courses at the UTT. His main areas of research are directed at blending and online learning, very important now. And he's the co-author of several ICT secondary school books. These titles include Log On to IT for CSEC, Log On to IT, and Interact with IT Books 1 to 3. And he is currently working as a series editor and author for the Cambridge Primary Computing Series Stages 1 to 6. So good morning to you, Dr. Birbal.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sanjay. And firstly, let me say that I wish to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very important forum. I think this is very apt at this time, given this COVID. As you have said, I have been a teacher educator for the past 35 years. I've been one of the, let's say, these persons who would have started teaching IT in the secondary school. So I've written extensively for the secondary school syllabus. I am teaching at the university where I teach. One of my main courses is integrating technology into the curriculum, and that is for the primary school. So I'm well aware of what's happening in the primary school, the secondary school, and what we do at the university. So let me say that when this pandemic started, the lecturers at UTT just simply moved into online learning. And that was possible because we have been training for it before. We were using our learning management systems and we were able to use it. That was not so simple for the teachers in the secondary and primary school. And therefore, what we are, this important position juncture here now, where they have all been forced to use it. They have no choice but to get into that platform. So things that COVID is a bad thing, but what it did do, it forced the rollout of technologies and teaching in the online environment. So teachers, they are now accustomed, they have been using the system for the next 2 years. And my focus now would be, what do we do from here? Where do we move from this point? And so teachers, we have to think about a way forward to enhance that experience that teachers got over the last 2 years. So I would stop at this point and allow you to move on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birbal. Appreciate that. So now we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Darren Mohammed. So Mr. Mohammed is a Senior Solutions Specialist Manager, Caribbean Region, Microsoft Country Representative, Microsoft Trinidad and Tobago. Darren is a Senior Manager at Microsoft responsible for the corporate and governance business across 33 countries, mainly within the Caribbean. Darren is also the country rep for Microsoft in Trinidad and Tobago. As more organizations and governments turn to technology to better engage and empower people, optimize operations and transform products and services, Darren continues to build partnerships throughout the region. Darren has a background in computer engineering and has worked in the ICT industry for over 26 years. The most tenures have been 14 years at Microsoft, where he has been recognized with several excellence awards. Prior to joining Microsoft and 5 years of working in a multinational oil and gas company as a technologist building and supporting upstream apps, he now uses that wealth of experience to assist in the development of an ecosystem. Darren also serves as an independent director on the board of GMMB Bank, GMMB Express Finance in Trinidad and Tobago, and on the regional GMMB Group IS committee. Good morning to you, Darren.
Good morning, Sanjay. So again, just like the other panelists, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to contribute. I mean, for us at Microsoft, we have a mission to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. Like all the other panelists, we've seen a lot of shifts, a lot of, movement towards digital, a lot of conversion of existing jobs to digital. And so we see the gap emerging in digital skills. And that is not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the globe. With that perspective and being, in the position that I am to cover the region, I'm really happy to contribute to what we're seeing in the market, in the job market, as well as, throw in some ideas as to how we can move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Darren. Appreciate that. Next on our list, we have Mr. and Mrs. Bola. So we have Robbie and Sushila Bola. And Robbie is a chartered accountant by profession. He manages an accounting practice, Robbie Bola and Associates, which provides cloud-based and virtual accounting solutions, taxation, external and internal audits. Sushila has a degree in human ecology with the option in nutrition and dietetics, and also supports their accounting practice. Robbie and Sushila are proud parents of 2 children, Rahul, who is 10 years, and Sabina, who's 5 years old. Both Rahul and Sabina attended sessions at the Digital Gurus Bootcamp in Digital Literacy and Digital Citizenship. So let me welcome both of them. I'm very delighted to have them here with us this morning.
All right. Thank you, Sanjay, and good morning to all. We would also like to thank the organizers for having us. It's very, very much appreciated. Now, for the purpose of the panel, we would really like to share our experience as internet user parents. Now, our children would have attended digital learning and digital citizenship classes pre and post COVID, and we'd like to share experiences there, why we enrolled them into those classes, and also the improvements that we saw with our children after those classes. We'd also like to discuss some of the challenges we face setting up our children for online schooling. And of course, we would like to contribute to the recommendations which would come out of this session and the whole conference as a whole to enhance the online capability and experience of children, teachers, and society as a whole. So thank you for having us.
Great, excellent. And now we have a student. It's so nice when we have young students in our audience and our panel. So we have Swasti Maharaj. She's 14-year-old Lakshmi Girls Hindu College student, very passionate about foreign languages, information technology, and literature. And she has been affiliated with the RSC for approximately 2 years and part of the tech support committee. She also tutors students from her school, along with other participants from the 7 to 12-year-old age group. So we welcome you here this morning, Swasti.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for that introduction. As you've heard, I've been with RSC, and this is how I got the opportunity to be here. So thank you all for having me today. And I'm pleased to share my perspective as a student, with digital competency in society. And yes, I look forward to having this discussion with the rest of my esteemed panel members.
Great, thank you very much. So I know that everyone is quite excited to go this morning. And just for our audience, you feel free to use the chat. I am ably assisted by fellow MAC director, Jacqueline Morris. So she will be able to collate some of the questions that you have on the chat on the different platforms, and then we'll have them at an appropriate time to engage the panel. So first, we're going to have a panel discussion here. And I'm going to go back to all of these panelists, and we're going to talk really about this topic, which is this ICT, digital competence, society, all these buzzwords in there. So I'm going to ask you all, what are some of the real challenges that exist for us to build this digital competence society, and how do you think we address? So we'll go in a round robin fashion. So Panachiva, I'll come back to you first. We have a few minutes and then we'll circle up. Panachiva?
Right. Thank you. Sorry about before, I get really passionate about this topic. It is like something that is very close to my heart, right? I've actually dedicated much of my past decade to this particular topic here and answering it. So some of the challenges, so we are speaking of the challenges, as you know, I've been pioneering and trying to implement this digital literacy and digital competency. I've been using frameworks some around the world, from the UK, from the US, and implementing them and using them here and having boot camps, as we heard, right? The reason why I had to do that is because one of the challenges that we have is that it's not included in the mainstream education system. So that's number one, right? There's nothing, right? There's not even the teaching of skills, because as I mentioned before, competency is knowledge, skills, and the attitude or the aptitude. And we have the knowledge, we have the skills being taught in other ways, right? But not much is done with the how to use it and how to use it properly. And there's a big gap in that sense of it. So there's a challenge in it by itself that it's not included. And it's very important, as you will hear from today's discussion, that these things are included from the formative years, from the very early stages, because some of the curriculums that we work with and that we are presently working with start from preschool, go up in these skills. And we are sorely lacking in that. So that's one of the challenges, a major challenge that I see from my standpoint.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. You'll have to give us a little more insight into that.
Sure.
What you mean by a boot camp, right? So keep that in mind for as we continue in discussion. So next, let me go to Dr. Birbal. Dr. Birbal, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, yes, Sanjay. I agree with Panachiva that a lot of these the competencies are lacking, mainly because it's not in the mainstream system, and we are not. We have not really developed that framework to engage these students at that primary level. So from the primary level, I think it's missing. In fact, someone I spoke to recently said we should have it from the ECC level. But I'm advocating something that starts at the primary school level and building on it and taking it straight through to the secondary school system. As you would have when you introduced me, said I'm working on something from the some in the UK, some books for the UK. And when I look at what they have and what they are going to introduce into their system, I mean, it's just amazing. And I think we need to have some serious discussions. If we want to move forward, we have to start thinking like what they are doing right now.
Okay, that's very useful. I'm going to come back to you on that curriculum change. I think that's a very useful point. So let me go straight to Darren now. So Darren, we've heard about the primary school, the secondary school. Let me hear from your side in terms of the corporate side.
Of course. Well, as I mentioned before, you know, the fourth industrial revolution was well under its way before we got to the pandemic. So there was a lot of digital transformation already happening in the corporate space, right? In terms of automation of, you know, job processes, optimizing the operations and so on, and even transforming the products and services to digital, right? So that already started. Now, what the pandemic did was that it just, you know, accelerated that tremendously. Because when you went into lockdowns, then of course, every single service had to become digital in order to reach the markets that they were used to. And just to give you a simple example, if you were in, let's say, sales and marketing, and you were accustomed to doing in-person events as your way of marketing to your audience, you would have immediately had to switch to digital and use social media and so on. So that, if you think of just that simple example, then it's an immediate retooling of skills, right? So, because you can't just say, well, you know, what do you do with the people who had the previous set of skills and then now are required with new skills? Of course, they have to reskill. And so reskilling creates this massive shift, right, in terms of, and demand, in terms of, you know, on people, you know, to take part in the emerging digital economy. And so that for us is where we wanted to invest as Microsoft. So we've created a digital skills initiative to also offer free courses and so on to help people to reskill. The other thing that we did was that using our LinkedIn acquisition, we were able to have a lot of data around jobs, emergent jobs. And our predictions are that there are going to be 149 million jobs created by 2025 that will require significant digital skills. Now, this also means then that these jobs mean that you're going to be taking part in an economy, of course, and we don't want Trinidad and Tobago to be left behind there. So we want to do our part as a private sector organization. And I as Minister was speaking this morning on public-private partnerships, we absolutely believe in those, you know, to make sure that we get the job done, right? That Trinidad and Tobago is not left behind in this massive shift that's happening globally.
Great, that's very useful. So we're going to have to touch a little bit on that, particularly with these new jobs. I mean, and this goes in quite nicely now for our parents and our students. So let me go to Robbie and Sushila. Now you've heard just what Darren has said in terms of that particular shift, these new jobs. And let me hear from you all. What has it been like for you all? Let's hear your experience.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, for us as parents, of course, internet is an issue. We really dropped in internet. I mean, last week there was a huge drop in digital, I believe, and it was affecting us as well. And so, you know, that's an issue with us all the time to ensure that our children has a proper internet internet connection at all times for their classes. And of course, we had to get, because we have 2 children, we had to get multiple devices. And that's difficult as well, because some people aren't able to get more than 1 device for their child. We were lucky to be able to do that. And, you know, clearing our schedule to ensure that at times we are there to supervise our children during classes has been a challenge because we work as well. So, and I have a household to run as well. So it's quite difficult at times. Of course, you know, each child needs their own space to do their online classes. And, you know, depending on the device and the specs the device has, you know, we had to change from laptops to desktop so that we could hardwire using an Ethernet cable to our router to ensure that internet would not drop as well. So those were some of the challenges that we faced.
So while I have you there on that particular issue, before I get to Swasti, you mentioned that you sent your children to this boot camp. What was the motivation behind that?
Okay, we decided to send them to the boot camp, so that they would be safe online, and be safe in the sites that they visit online, to be aware of what online predators are and, online bullying and so on, to make sure that they were exposed to the technology and so that they can develop the skills and the competencies with competency, sorry, with using computer.
Very nice.
I don't know if you want to continue, Robbie.
Yeah, and also thank you, Cecilia. We wanted I know Dr. Birbal made the point that what is happening in the UK and the rest of the world and whatnot. We didn't really want our children to be left behind. We wanted them to explore and be exposed to the professions and the opportunities that technology could bring. And of course, if it is they choose another profession, of course, IT, digital technology is complementary to professions. Now it's in everything. So we wanted them to keep up with the rest of the world in that sense.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Robbie. That's very useful there. I mean, it builds on what Darren just spoke about. So let me bring in our student, Swasti. So I know we have a lot of students online here with us today. So you're getting a lovely opportunity to voice from your perspective, and of course, I'm sure from their perspective as well. You tell us about some of those challenges.
Yes, well, the present education landscape, begs for technology-rich approval to education. And thus this forum is so critical at this time. And I believe the integration of ICT across all subjects allows for the successful development of multiple intelligences. And, my suggestions to help the digital competency in society, should be curriculum reform across all subject areas to cater, right? And we all know that our education is quite dynamic. And as educators and the students, we should be very progressive thinking. And one of my biggest fears, though, is for schools to reopen and we retrogress back to the teaching and learning styles pre-COVID. For example, the chalk and talk or the whiteboard, right? And you can definitely see a difference where students tend to be a lot more disenchanted with the theory learning, but now with online learning, you have so many visuals and practical things that you can do, and students are now more willing and able to learn, right? And according to George Gurus, technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. And we know with COVID, it has really pushed teachers into this IT. It was a big push because my mom, who's also a teacher, had to get accustomed to this new platform, Zoom, Google Classroom, all of these new platforms. And I think now that we've been pushed into it, it's our time to embrace the technology. And yeah, that's my perspective. I think, that we should get a curriculum reform to help integrate the ICT into our school syllabus.
Great. So thank you. You've hit the nail on the head. And I'm going to go straight into curriculum reform. And curriculum reform, you have curriculum reform, but then you have to ensure that you have the delivery of the curriculum. So there are two aspects of it. So let's go to Pandit Shiva, Dr. Birbal, and Darren. I want to get your take on this because this curriculum reform is at all levels. So Pandit Shiva, let's start with you first.
Sure. So I'm really, really impressed with Swasti. I knew her from a very young child, and I'm really impressed with her input here. And as she said, spoke about multiple intelligences and all these things. I'll bring in that a little later. But in terms of curriculum review, UNESCO, and we're looking at competencies in specific ICT competencies. UNESCO actually has an ICT competency framework, which for education and for teachers, right? And their idea behind it is that successful integration for ICT into teaching and learning requires rethinking the role of teachers in planning and applying ICT to enhance and transform learning. Education systems need to regularly update and reform teacher preparation, professional development accordingly, ensuring that all teachers can harness technology and education. And recently, I said my thoughts keep evolving on this. In the pandemic and having successfully implemented a Google system for our primary school, and many schools are helping along, I actually became a Google certified educator and soon to be a Google certified trainer. And Google themselves has been looking at, they have in their Google certified educator system, they have their competencies that they call the 4 C's, which are collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. These things have to be infused into the education system, definitely. And as we have Darren here, I would not leave out Microsoft, right? Microsoft does have their Microsoft Certified Educator program, which I am also going on to after my Google Certified Educator trainer. And they have their 21st century digital skills framework that they have based their educator training in. That includes also collaboration, skills communication, knowledge construction, self-regulation, real-world problem solving and innovation, and the actual use of ICT in learning. So we have frameworks out there. We have things that are already out there when it comes to curriculum and how we could integrate it. As you heard from the customer themselves, the student asking for this. And we also heard from the parents, ICT is like salt, we say in Trinidad, right? ICT is in everything. So we need to acknowledge that and move towards that.
That's very useful. So Dr. Birbal, you tell us here, how do we make this happen? I mean, you are the author of these textbooks. You understand what it is to craft this. What's our next step for this? How do we make this happen? Tell us.
Right. So there are 2 real issues. So Swasti been talking about, Pandit has been talking about it. It's curriculum reform, and that's a major point. The other one is training, because with curriculum reform, you must also have training. So let's start with curriculum reform. Firstly, curriculum reform thinks about what type of citizen I want to prepare for the next generation, or in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years, what type of citizen do I want to get? As Darren said, we're going to have 149 million jobs coming up. With that 149 million jobs, and with the depletion of the oil and gas sector in Trinidad, we need to position ourselves to get into that sector. How do we do that? What type of planning needs to get in place, be put in place, so that we can start? So when our students graduate from school, they can find jobs in that sector, the 149 million jobs that's going to be available. So what we're saying is that there must be a review of the primary school curriculum and the inclusion of computer science in primary school. So we must have computer science starting at that very low level, all right? From 5-year-olds, we are writing books now for 5-year-olds, which I'm engaged in. And these concepts of networking and computational thinking, they are included. Programming, managing data, network and digital communication, computer systems. Those 5 strands are part of the computer science program that is being developed for the UK and many other countries in the Far East. That is what they envisage. This is a Cambridge level type of program that was developed and will be marketed shortly. Now we need to get on board with that. So first of all, we need to change it there. When we change it at the primary school level, we also have to make changes at the secondary school level, because I was looking at the lower secondary school IT curriculum, which is actually a good curriculum, but it needs to be updated because it was done in 2014. So that also has to be updated, because a lot of what they are doing at that level is what is required now in the primary school level. So we have to progress, and we have to say, this is what we're doing here. We have to look at how we're building on these skills as we go on. So there needs to be that curriculum reform for the primary school. We need to have an updating of the curriculum, IT curriculum in the secondary school. And then I think CXC will also need to revisit what they're doing in terms of IT and their exams at IT, the level at which they're going to pitch it. Because for those of you who are into IT, you would know that Python programming is being taught, or will be taught, to standard 5 students in the UK. All right, standard 5 students will be doing Python programming. And when I think about that, I think about when when are our students learning that in university? All right, so we have to be prepared. Another point I want to make, and which is something, my son attends a university in Canada, and when he started, he said, "Dad, we are 10 years behind those people." He had to quickly learn so much to be able to be successful in the programming courses that he was enrolled in. So we have to lift our game if we want to compete and be competitive in the global market. So the curriculum is one of the ways we have to deal with it. The second thing that we have to do, training. You can't ask primary school teachers to teach IT, because where would have gotten that training? It's not technology integration again, because that is what we teach at the primary school, at the university. We teach them how to integrate technology into the teaching. There's a difference between integrating the technology and using the technology. We teach them how to integrate the technology. But we don't teach them IT. We don't teach them programming. We don't teach them hardware, software, managing data, network and digital communications. We don't teach them that. We are teaching them the tools that they can use to deliver the curriculum. All right? So that is a major area. We have to beef up, and we have to really put a proper training program in place. If we want to change the curriculum, we also have to include that training aspect of it. And I before
Sure.
One last point. There must be that cultural shift. The minister spoke about it. A cultural shift, not within our school system and within the society at large. We need to have that cultural shift where people start to think differently about IT. The home has now become the school. Your classroom is in the home. How parents deal with that? That has to change, because we can have classes happening at the home. There's no need to shut down a school anymore. The SOA is not working. Online classes. There's no shutting down of school. But then there must be that cultural shift. Our students must be able to access the online classes. So infrastructure is another point that we have to talk about. But there must be that accommodating environment where the students can function from at home. So these are some of the main areas which we can focus on.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Birbal. Now, Darren, I think he set you up quite nicely. So over to you, Darren.
Well, first of all, let me say that, and I need to say it, I have a lot of sympathy for educators now. I mean, I feel like they were thrown into something, and and that they themselves were challenged, right, to make shifts. And it's not their fault. They didn't invent the virus. They did not ask for this. I mean, they've been trained in a certain way, and now they're being asked to do something different. So first of all, my heart goes out to them. My heart also goes out to students, because even before the pandemic, students were going digital. Students are digital. I mean, young people are digital. You give them a smartphone, they could probably run rings around any adult in the room. And so they themselves are questioning the education system. They're like, if I have access to Google, then what do I need a teacher for? Or, so they're asking real questions about the education system. And so when we talk about curriculum reform, we have to also think that that is part of it, but we can't leave the education system to fix the problem, to close the gap. And so what we also need to do is we have to, you have to attack it from all fronts. You have to empower parents to empower their kids, you know, to learn on their own. You can, kids tell you nowadays that if I don't know something, I go to YouTube, you know, and so they themselves are already getting empowered on their own to pursue a STEM career or to pursue coding or to, because all of the content, all the courses are going to be there. Now, what I believe is should happen is that all stakeholders need to get together and to make sure that we give the students the best shot and the most empowerment, right? Going forward to take part in this emerging economy that is going to happen. And so there is no silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. I can't say that curriculum reform is going to happen, because then you're going to end up dealing with tutor and unions and so on about, well, you know, I have to change my skills. So do I get new pay, or what's the new pay cycle? And there's just so much things that we have to overcome. But in the meantime, we have to acknowledge that while we're figuring those things out, we can't leave students behind. And we have to make sure that those who want to pursue and those who want to be empowered have access, you know, can pursue it on their own and absolutely learn on their own if they need to. Or, you know, we do public-private partnerships and we help them along while the system is being corrected.
So I think that's a really good point on the empowering side, which is it aligns well with what you can do, what I as an individual can do, what we can do to make that change and ensure that our ecosystem can move forward. And that's some really good points, Darren. Thanks for that. So let me go to Swasti first. So Swasti, now I know you have a lot of your classmates online, so I'd like to say hello to them as well too. I'd like to thank them for participating with us, and you're doing them, you know, really good. You're doing them proud. So keep up that good work. But let me ask you, in terms of Darren's point on empowering, tell me more from a student perspective. What does that mean, given the challenges that, you know, it's obviously there? Tell us more from that perspective.
I completely agree with Mr. Mohammed. The good thing about the online classes and stuff is that it really does cater for the students who are very strong in certain subjects, and maybe those who are maybe weaker in these subjects. And I was talking with Pandit Shiva recently, and he said the same thing. While one student, well, maybe a few of them who are quite, you know, strong in that subject, the teacher can go ahead and give them other worksheets and links to continue helping them improve, right? Whereas the weaker ones, they also get the individual attention they need. And the teacher's job is really to help them navigate where to go to help themselves. And that really empowers the students, you know, to be independent. And that's a good thing about the online learning. It really helps the students with their independence. And also now students can create like their own PowerPoints, which makes room for student presentations to promote standard English oracy skills. Then additionally, you have their development in their research skills. So students who are passionate about the arts and drama and digital and video productions, they can now blossom in this area, right? And with my previous points, you know, there's now retention of information for visual learners through the graphics and the videos. And again, to echo George Kuro saying, technology is not a tool, but it can give learners a voice that they may not have even had before. And this is why the online classes, I personally find really helps students find their voice in terms of what they choose to do. And yeah, online learning pushes them to be independent. And I believe in the IT syllabus as well, that schools should pivot around, you know, cybersecurity and the myriad of social media platforms, and maybe even entrepreneurship and, you know, technology-based jobs and job opportunities. So that's my perspective on the whole,
That's
you
good.
know.
That's good. I mean, I
Yeah.
really appreciate that view, Swasti, and what you're highlighting there is that it allows the students to go beyond the curriculum and expand their knowledge base, and it gives them that option, which is quite priceless. So Robbie and Sushila, I mean, we've heard from everyone else so far as parents, empowering. What can you say about that?
So the panel made some very, very excellent points, and a couple things I think would be really critical in moving us forward. I personally think the cultural shift is a very, very big challenge for us. Knowing how we trainees are and change for all, could be difficult. When you think back, let's say more than 100 years ago, when you had horse-drawn carriages, and then we moved to the internal combustion engine, and now we are making another transition in the world to electric cars. So I think everyone in society has to realize, ICT is real, and we need to shift in this area as well. So we need to find a way to make sure this cultural shift across the entire realm of society is made, not only students and teachers, but full remit of society. So we wanted to make that point. And of course, now in terms of, it was very welcoming when the minister would have spoken, where he would have asked for recommendations out of this conference. That was very welcoming to us. But I know we have, when you look at the panel, Pandit Shiva, Dr. Birbal, Mr. Mohammed, very distinguished panelists within their own areas. I think, we have the talent locally, of course, and of course we can leverage international talent in terms to move forward our society. However, maybe we should consider studying other societies, what they would have done to implement these technologies, and probably we could learn from some of their mistakes so that we could move our society forward in the right direction.
Okay, that's pretty useful, and that theme of cultural shift has been echoed, by multiple panelists, and I'm gonna touch on this as well as the infrastructure, because we can get the competency, but you also need the infrastructure to get you along that path. So we're gonna go another cycle here now, and let's talk about the cultural and the infrastructure. You could mix them if you like, but let's start with the cultural and then the infrastructure. So Pandit Shiva, cultural and infrastructure, 2 points there. I know they're 2 separate points, but what are your thoughts on those things?
Right. So I know in our pre-discussions, we would have discussed it in terms of the chicken and the egg, which comes first, right? So in terms of that, if we think of before we become legal drivers on the roadways, you have to go through that learning process first of taking the regulations, then training yourself, and then you get to go behind an actual a vehicle, all right, by yourself, to control it by yourself. And this is where we yes, while we wait and the infrastructure is being developed, we need to put things in place where we can prepare ourselves for when the infrastructure is ready. And it's already there, of course, in many ways that we could use it. So to me, it would be the training part of it, right? And then there's a big difference between training and education, right? So training, yes, like how the teachers were thrown into a new realm of teaching, they needed to be trained, right? So training was their part. But education is where we're looking at. We're looking at a competent society, and we are not looking at the training, right? So we have to train the teachers, and the teachers will get their education through their formal education routes as well, right? But the education part of it is what I am more interested in seeing this type of curriculum being introduced in, so that we could really get those competent end users.
Okay, good. That's very useful. Dr. Birbal?
Yeah, so we're talking about this cultural shift, and we're talking about infrastructure. We can't get the curriculum going properly, I should say properly, until we get the proper infrastructure. So infrastructure is key to making things happen, because as you would know, if you don't have proper internet, you can't run your online classes. If you don't have access to the internet where you live, then you can't be a part of your online classes. So infrastructure is key. So we need to put the infrastructure in place. The infrastructure is important, and the cultural shift is also important, because people need to accept this new way of teaching and learning. There must become an acceptance. Some people, they don't believe in it. Although the research gives you all the benefits of online learning, the ability to communicate. Parents can now contact the teachers directly online. There's greater chance for collaboration among students. They could collaborate with all the technologies that they have. There's a greater opportunity for differentiated learning, right? You have students with different abilities in the classroom. You're teaching an online class, students getting bored, like we were discussing sometime. And how do you set, you have websites, you could say, okay, you go ahead and you do this. So you're still engaging students, but you're teaching your class. So all of these things have to be considered. So that acceptance of the online mode of teaching is something that is key. How do you behave in your environment when this is being delivered? A child is doing work at home. I've heard teachers complaining about parents actually jumping in the classroom while the teacher is delivering the lesson. We have to respect the boundaries. So that respect for the boundaries when the class the lessons are being delivered. Those are important things. Those things would come with that understanding, that cultural shift of what is expected of you while these things are happening, while a class is being delivered. How do you communicate your digital literacy? How do you communicate with the teacher? What do you write in your communication? How you write it? All of these things have to be taught to people. Students in school might learn about it, but a lot of people in the wider society may not know. How do we get the wider society to buy into this new educational trust that we're trying to get into our society? Those are the things. And I want to come back to trading again. And I just to mention this one point. During the pandemic, teachers have been using the technology. They have been using the technology they have been using the platforms to deliver the lessons. All right. So many of them, they have been using it in such a way, they actually replicated what they're doing in class. So they have their board, they have their camera, and they're writing. Some of them have been doing that. Some of them is sitting and reading stuff out to their students. So while these teachers many of them have not been trained, but that's just the first level. So we need to take them to the next level. And the next level is what we call technology integration. How do you now use the tools? How do you now use all these tools that we have, all the apps, all these things, and integrate? How do we get the students to collaborate online, to develop, to develop their ideas, to present their ideas? So you engage the students. How do we keep the students engaged in this setting? So the first level has been met. Let's say we are all in the first level, we are all on the platform, the learning management system, we are in Google Classroom, we're at Moodle, one of these platforms that you're using. Yes, we're there. The next level now, how do we make our lessons come alive, integrate the technology in that? And that comes with retraining of our teachers. So that is the key aspect: curriculum development, retraining, and infrastructure.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Birbal. So Darren, coming back to you on those two initial points we started off on, the cultural as well as the infrastructure. I mean, Dr. Birbal raised a really good point, that next level, which I'm sure we'll pivot on after, but over to you, Darren.
Yeah, sure. So on the cultural, I mean, in my experience, every school has a lighthouse teacher, a teacher who, and the students probably will attest to this. There is a teacher already who is more, more future thinking technology, wants to does integrate technology into the class. I want to speak specifically to those teachers to get the cultural shift. And I want to speak to the principals. First, empower those teachers to start sharing their experience, to start sharing and make them leaders, make them those that can encourage others, right, to do the same. And to be that lighthouse within the school to then start spreading that word, right? And as I said, the tools are there, and I'll give a simple example of Minecraft Education Edition. there's so many kids play Minecraft. And when you integrate Minecraft, the education edition, to start teaching creativity or collaboration or teamwork or problem solving, you would get so much more interest in that class. And you would get, you would not have to, they have to be like forcing kids into the class. They're going to want to come to that class. They're going to want to keep doing it. And just simple example. So I wanted to say and encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Keep spreading the word, keep talking to the other teachers in the staff room, and keep encouraging and making those motions and becoming sort of the trainer who trains the others, right? On the access, I mean, this one I'm really passionate about. I think access and infrastructure has this it has this dangerous component of it, of leaving certain people behind. And when I say certain people, I mean people maybe of African descent or people below us on the poverty line, and we must never, or girls. If we think of STEM and coding, we might lose girls. So and so we have to. I want to encourage that we focus on diversity, on inclusion, to make sure that there is no one left behind. Now, we're blessed in Trinidad and Tobago where when you need help on the infrastructure side, I can't imagine that there isn't somebody willing to help. There isn't some sort of private sector agency who's willing to donate devices or to. So I think what it is that sometimes we need to identify these groups and then raise hands, ask for help, and I believe that in Trinidad and Tobago, help does come.
Thank you, Darren. That's very useful. So we're getting to a point in our session here where I want to take some of the questions from our participants and invite those who are on the platform with us. If you'd like to ask any questions to the panel, feel free to raise your hand. I will acknowledge you and ask that you limit your contribution, whether it be a question or a comment, to within 30 seconds, please. Okay, so will I recognize Albert Daniel? Albert, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. I hope I can meet the 30 seconds, but congratulations, TTIGF and this panel in particular for a very rich and valuable discussion. I was particularly impressed with Swasti. I hope I pronounced it properly. This is a very good indication of where the youth of Trinidad are going. The minister spoke about a partnership, and ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, is happy to continue to support the TTIGF, especially with the direction that you were taking with your discussions and activities. What I wanted to add to this discussion was the topic related to building competencies, particularly in the young people, in accessing global markets. The internet has changed dramatically. You have your .tt domain name, which identifies email addresses and websites as uniquely Trinidadian, but there are lots of new domain names, .business, .travel, .banks. And with the 4.5 billion users on the internet right now, and the expected 1 billion by 2023, I think it's important that your young people understand the importance of universal acceptance in ensuring that they have access to these markets. The problem is that some of these new domain names are not accessible on our current systems. So your young coders, your young developers, your young system administrators need to be aware of this so that when new systems are built and somebody comes with a domain name or an email address in Arabic, Chinese, or Indian, that email address will work in your system. When the websites are trying to be accessed for .business, .banks, .travel, we are accustomed of using .com, .org, .edu. We have to make sure that our systems work. I think I've gone more than 30 seconds, but I just wanted to drop that in as one of the digital competencies that you could consider looking at in your development. This whole issue of universal acceptance and how you prepare your young people for it. And I'll post a link in the chat right now, which would allow you to get a little bit more detail on that. Sorry for going over the 30 seconds.
No problem, Albert. Thank you very much. And thank you to you and ICANN for your continued support in this annual event. It's been a pillar stone for us. And let me add to what you have said there, Albert, with respect to Swasti. We'd like to thank Raj and the RSC International. We have over 100 students here, and it's very much a good sign for us, particularly as we transition forward. So I see some more hands there. Let me first recognize Din Akbar Ali. Din, right ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on the 30 seconds. Great panel, great discussion. I've been on a couple for the last couple of months. I've been on a discussion with UNESCO and CTU. So this is an additional, and it's been really nice to see everybody getting on board with online education. We've actually developed a scenario as a Good Samaritan project, and it's been launched since 2019 with the pandemic for free. A lot of, basically we got all the textbook authors put everything together. What I wanted to make a comment on is that we have seen all the facades from parents using it to teachers and students. And what we realize is that parents have actually become the teacher in the home. And what has been missing is that from the textbooks, there's not a manual for a parent to read digitally on all of these online platforms. And my contribution, I just want to say that teachers need to be more included in all of these discussions, because we have a lot of technologists, a lot of people with a vast amount of experience, but the teachers are the one who actually need to have the write the manuscript with everybody to get it to be a success.
Great. Thank you very much, Dean. It's been quite a while. Hope to see you soon.
Hope to see you soon. Take care. Thanks a lot.
All right. And moving on to, I see Jacqueline. I recognize Jacqueline Morris.
Yes. Hi. We've got some questions from the chat. Kapil Goyal asks how to cope with people with insurgent ideology, hate speech, and fake news to make cyberspace more secure, inclusive, and trustworthy ecosystem for the next billion citizens. And that was followed up by Deirdre, who asked about how do we identify insurgent ideology. So I don't know if anyone has any.
Well, let's throw that out to Pondichiva. You want to start with you?
Definitely. All right, that's right up my alley there.
Correct.
Right. So that's actually something that I've been doing for the past 10 years, as I said. And you asked about the boot camps, right? So the boot camps, I actually, being a pundit, being an educator, being in IT, I've been looking at the moral side of internet use and technology use and so on. So that's why I started associations with the Harvard School of Graduate School of Education, Howard Gardner. That's why I said the multiple intelligences, Howard Gardner. He developed a whole curriculum together with an organization by the name of Common Sense, which I'm a certified common sense educator. And for the past 10 years, I've been teaching from, as you said, from 4 years old up. I've been using this curriculum. And this curriculum particularly has things like media balance and well-being, privacy and security, digital footprint and identity, relationships and communication, cyberbullying, digital drama, hate speech, right? News and media literacy. And these skills, we tend to think that, we learn them by the way. But in this day and age where we are moving so quickly with the integration of technology and moving so fast with the use of increased use of technology, these things are even more important to teach these things from this curriculum, I started from preschool. So the bowlers here, their daughter, even before she entered into primary school, would have done my boot camp. And I guess they would add to what that would have done for their kids in this new pandemic and beyond it.
Okay, thanks, Pondichiva. Anyone else on the panel would like to contribute to that? Just to refamiliarize yourself with the question that Jacqueline asks is, how do people cope with the insurgent ideology, hate speech, and fake news to make cyberspace more secure, inclusive, trustworthy? And then a follow-up question on that was, how can we clearly identify insurgent ideology in a world which has been suddenly brought so many diverse opinions? Anybody else want to make a contribution to that?
I think that goes back to online safety, right, of kids. And I believe that here again, unfortunately, it goes to the parents as well to start to pay attention to what your kids are doing online. I'm not saying that you have to be, you know, sort of tracking them and so on, but try to identify, you know, or to have conversations with them always as to, you know, what they're doing. And then looking out for their changes in behavior in case that there is a risk, you know, that they are being engaged or you know, by some bad actor on the internet. I mean, there are some rules that you have to set. I mean, some ground rules about, you know, letting them understand how to keep their information private, not to share it willingly online. Also, you have to teach them respect, right? Because they themselves could turn into bullies as well as being bullied online. So how to respect each other, and you know, just how to use the computer safely, right? Just make sure that that what they're doing and, you know, doesn't expose them or expose the computer itself to attacks of cybersecurity attacks and so on. So I mean, online safety is a huge topic, but I strongly recommend that all parents do the research. There's a lot of content to teach parents about online safety, and you know, to have that conversation with your kids.
Thanks, Darren. So that, well, Ravi and Sushila, you're not going to come to you all on this one. Tell us from your perspective.
Well, of course, you know, building from what Pandit Shiva has said, you know, our kids, both of our kids attended his boot camp. Our son Raul before the pandemic and our daughter after. But, you know, safety is always a concern when they're online. Like, you know, predators, we are aware that there are predators online. And they were taught that in the boot camps, how to be aware of that, not to talk to strangers online, what to do if somebody tries to get in touch with them online. So at 5 years old and at 7, you know, they were able to do this on their own. And, you know, that's why the bootcamp for us was so important. And, you know, it made them more confident in using the platform and the technology. Now that they are online for the past 2 years now, and they've expressed desires and, you know, strong interest in careers and technological fields and so on. You want to expand?
Yeah, so it has been a very, very positive experience. I mean, we like for instance, the digital literacy and digital citizenship classes. I mean, other skills besides, you know, the online safety and whatnot. Other skills were learned, you know, the animation, presentations. It was so much fun for children. I think the point was made earlier where children want to attend classes because it's fun. This way of learning, because I think the children now are wired differently to our generation. They want to see ICT in their learning, and these classes and these platforms, while it provides the safety, it creates a whole new attitude towards learning, a very positive one.
Thank you, Ravi and Sushila. Now, Swasi, I see you shaking your head. Now, I want to come back a little bit to that question in terms of those insurgent ideologies, the hate speech, the fake news. As a student, you tell me, how do you all cope with that?
Well, again, with IT, you know, it has its pros and cons, right? In this case, you know, cyberbullying and stuff being the cons. But this is why, which I did say earlier, maybe cybersecurity and stuff like that should be implemented in the school syllabus from a young age, preschool, primary school. And I really do applaud Mr. and Mrs. Bola for having their children, you know, giving them that exposure to the ICT at such a young age. And I've also mentioned to them before that, you know, the ICT and even foreign languages should be implemented for kids at such a young age because they tend to grow with it. And if the cybersecurity is, if they are learning it at such a young age, they will continue to grow with it and, you know, help be able to protect themselves independently. But again, also parents would have to, monitor them at the same time. But yeah, with cyberbullying, I mean, it's not something nice, but with the cybersecurity and learning, even maybe attending tech camps, for example, RSC or Digital Guru and stuff like that, you tend to learn a lot. And that's how my mom ended up volunteering me to join the RSC camp. And honestly, with RSC, we'll learn stuff like app development and web development and even cybersecurity. So, it always goes back to the parents, what they implement into their children's lives. And, it does have an impact. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Thank you very much, Swasti. So I'm conscious of time. We're going to go into the last phase of this panel session. I see there's a hand by Relon Lawrence. So Relon will be our last audience question or comment, and then we'll go into wrapping up the session. So Relon.
Hi, good day. You can hear me?
Morning. How are you doing?
Good day. Well, the two points were made with regards to Trinidad being separated or isolated from internet outages via like destruction of underwater cables or anything like that, as well as being able to host your own and children learning like Python and stuff in the UK, which brings me to why not include the whole open source aspect of technology, where we are able to host our own, teach our own, and sustain our own, and not be dependent on big companies like the Googles and the Amazons out there. Is there any work being done or anything being taught towards that, or educating people towards that? Because we are so dependent on these few companies to get things done that we don't know that there are things that we can do for ourselves that can achieve the same goals a lot easier, a lot cheaper, with security and control in mind.
Okay, thank you, Roland. I appreciate the contribution. I'm going to throw this one to Dr. Birbal. You want to just, Dr. Birbal and Darren, for a quick 30-second response before we begin to wrap up?
Developing our own competencies in, I guess, we have the capacity here for that. We have the people with the background, so we can develop our own competencies. We just need to put the committees together and work on it. So I see that as a possibility. We don't have to depend on outside. We have we have enough expertise internally. And just in yourself and Mr. Mohammed, we have people here with the competencies. And if you look at the competencies of the people in the other panels, you will realize that Trinidad do have people with excellent backgrounds in IT, and they can do what you're talking about. So I believe it is possible if we have the right people coming together. We can do that.
Okay, great. Darren.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, in the question, open source was linked to local content, and I want to delink those because so open source technologies, and we've embraced open source technologies. In fact, most of the virtual machines that run in our cloud services are Linux-based machines, so they are based on open source. So using open source as technology that you would develop, and then using it in a hybrid sort of approach to do big things. So in terms of, let's look at a simple technology like artificial intelligence. If you were to try to build locally the compute power needed to do artificial intelligence, the scale that you would need, and it probably would not have a cost. It would not be cost positive to do that. So therefore, blending now using sort of the compute power of a large scale organization plus the open source technology, so that you can develop in a code base that is not dictated by any party, that is community source, then I think that you will have a sweet spot to create local content or local innovation that can go big and scale big and go global.
Great, thanks. Very insightful contribution there, Darren. So we are going to wrap up this panel now. Mindful that I understand Swasti has a class at 10 to, all right? So we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to invite each of you all to give a very brief 30-second no more than 30-second contribution, and then I'll wrap up with a vote of thanks. So Pandit Shiva, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much once again, and it was indeed a pleasure to be here with all these esteemed panelists here to discuss this, and hopefully, you know, it falls onto the right ear, because ideally we would like to see the digital literacy, the computer science, the digital citizenship all being integrated into our education system from the primary, at least to the secondary schools. However, immediate next steps for me haven't been, as we already have programs, the RSC, as you have heard, with Swasti, and my programs that I have from the primary level going up. One of the reasons why we have not been able to reach wider audiences is because these things cost money. We need partnerships, we need sponsorship, right? So immediate next steps, anyone who wishes to, and then we have a lot listening on, a lot of viewers here. I've already gotten messages actually, right? If in any way your corporate responsibility could assist us in getting the word out. You know, I even had TV programs and so on that reach large audiences. So we thank that for the next steps. Thank you very much for being here. And
thank you, Dr. Birbal.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I think I would like to thank all the other panelists for contributing and being part of this discussion. I must say that some very important views were raised, and I would like to see some action taken in some of the areas. I think curriculum reform is an important step forward for creating the type of society that we need, that digital society that the minister was speaking about. I think that cultural shift is also needed to make sure that it happens. And I am hoping that the infrastructure gets put in place so that all this can fall into one cohesive movement forward. So with that, I would like to say thank you all very much for having me here.
Excellent. Darren?
Yeah, again, I thanks to all the panelists. I really enjoyed the discussion. I really enjoyed the conversation, and you know, the blend of different backgrounds of all the panelists. That was really, really awesome. I wanna close with by basically expressing a lot of gratitude for the educators in the country and the parents in the country. The pandemic was not easy, and the shift was not easy, and you did it. You know, the shift of moving the school classroom into the home, so the parents did it. They did the extra time. They did the work that they needed to do with their children. The educators who had to retool and who had their internet dropped and during their class and created all that anxiety and so on. Again, I want to thank you for getting us through it, getting our kids through it. And to be honest, I'm really impressed by Trinidad and Tobago and our capabilities and the talent that we always are able to grow in our education system. And I think the future is very, very bright. I believe we will be taking part in the digital economy. And I can guarantee you that Microsoft is going to do its part to partner up with anyone who wants to advance that.
Thank you very much, Darren. Appreciate that. Robbie and Sushila, very briefly.
Thank you. We would also like to thank everyone for having us, and it was very insightful to be part of the discussion. Just to sum up in our 30 seconds, we would like to also focus on the cultural and infrastructure points that were raised. We need to take credit, though, that some things are being done in society, albeit more can be done. Like, for instance, right now at Legal Affairs, certain things you can only do online, incorporate a company, file an annual return, tax returns, and so forth. The government has also taken certain initiatives, and it was very good to hear some of the points that was raised by the minister. I mean, duties are off equipment, sorting out the internet cable landing points, of course, but maybe we should consider having loans for devices interest-free, because you have SME loans that are being provided to businesses interest-free now. So maybe we should consider for families that need devices having interest-free loans for them, and also where corporate Trinidad can help out and provide devices so everyone is met. And also, of course, with respect to the internet providing, maybe, I don't know if internet services subsidized now, but maybe we should consider doing that, at least across the board for certain families. And then, of course, e-learning platforms for our local curriculum should be made available. Right now, the courses are delivered, in person. But if it is you have an e-learning program for our local content, students can access and re-access, and there can be an assessment at the end. So that's another way of delivering to our children. We have a few more points, but we know we only have 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
But thank you very much, Robbie and Sushila. Swasti, I know you have a class. Do any final words to everyone?
I'd just like to say again, thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a really rich discussion here. And moving forward, I look forward to the implementation of the online exams, the less writing and more discussions in classrooms, and the practical, authentic approaches to the learning. So with that, I say goodbye, and I applaud the teachers and parents and also the students for getting through with these online classes.
Thank you very much, Swasti. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank our panelists today for a very warm, insightful contributions. It has been a very spirited discussion. Thank you all for taking the time. I'd like to thank the audience for their participation as well. And thanks to the TTIGF for this session. I'd like to thank my co-moderator. Would like to wish everyone a productive day, stay safe, and best wishes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good morning, colleagues. Can you just
Yes.
a sound check for me?
Yes, good morning. I'm here. Hopefully I'm being heard.
I'm hearing you fine, and you hearing me okay, Nigel?
Perfectly, perfectly.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Morning.
Are you all hearing me clearly?
Yeah, yes, Niran, I can make you out.
Great.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Patrick.
Hi, Niran. Hi, Patrick.
Yes, Patrick. Good to hear you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Annie here.
All right.
Hey, Annie.
We're all ready. We're all standing by. Just to let you know that just the same order that you listed here is the order that I'll be introducing you.
Nigel, I have a few slides, so perhaps I can just see if just
Right,
confirm
that you have the capability. Yes.
right. So the host has disabled. So if the host can enable.
Right.
Oh, it's going to disable I'll switch back as soon as, so
Right.
you can confirm whether you can see my screen. Are you seeing?
It hasn't come up yet. It just says you've started screen sharing, but it's not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Devananti Luxing. Same thing as Nigel has said.
Okay, so I'm going to stop share.
And try it again.
And I'm going to try again.
Yes, I'm seeing it now. Data availability and disaggregation. Right. Yep, and it's in full screen mode. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to stop share, so you can go back to the home screen.
And in fact, any others who might have slides to share, you could possibly test as well.
Nigel, I have a few slides as well. I'll try to share my screen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we see enhancing internet data and measurement for development. We see that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, and I understand Mr. Devananti Luxing is our technical support. He'll be checking the chat and stuff for us to track questions and all that good stuff.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
Yes.
Lawrence? Lorna? Could you pass this pile of books? There's 3 books there. The third one. No, that's a 4.
You forgot to mute Kim.
Oh.
Okay, this is Devanand Laksing. I think it's maybe 1:15. My name is Devanand Laksing. I'm a TTIGF board member, and I'm from the Trinidad and Tobago Computer Society. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for our next panel session, Enhancing Internet Research, Data, and Measurement for Development, Mr. Nigel Casimir. Nigel Casimir is a telecommunications engineer with over 30 years experience in the technical, operational, and executive management of telecommunication systems and services. He has intimate understanding of a broad range of information and communication technologies and services, with practical experience in network and service planning, operations management, and domestic and international telecommunications policy development. Mr. Casimir has functioned as a consulting telecommunications specialist since July 2005 and has worked extensively with the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, or CTU, Secretariat in Port of Spain, developing and promoting harmonized Caribbean positions in the areas of spectrum management, internet governance, and ICT policy. He has also successfully conducted consultancies for several of the member governments of the CTU. Mr. Casimir has bachelor and master degrees in electrical engineering, as well as a diploma in management studies from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. He is a fellow of the Telecommunications Engineering and Management Institute of Canada and an alumnus of the Advanced Management Program at INSEAD, Fontainebleau, France. So, Nigel Casimir, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Dev, for that introduction. And I'm looking forward indeed to this particular panel. We're looking at enhancing internet research, data, and measurement for development. I also bring greetings from the CTU Secretariat, and it's the Secretary General, Mr. Rodney Taylor. Regrets that we cannot have more fulsome participation from the CTU Secretariat today. Secretariat is based here in Port of Spain, actually, owing to our own simultaneous event on ICT and education. So the previous panel, in fact, was right up our alley in terms of that particular event that's ongoing also this morning. So we'll hope to have more participation from the Secretariat at tomorrow's session. Basically, over the past several years, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union has sought to strengthen linkages between the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, which we convene annually, and the multiple national IGFs in the Caribbean, such as the TTIGF. And we now routinely receive reports from the TTIGF and others around the Caribbean as a standing part of our CIGF agenda, Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And sort of in feedback, this panel discussion is addressing a topic that was discussed at the last CIGF in August 2021. So the IGFs feed content into the CIGF, and the CIGF is also feeding content back down to the national IGFs. And what we found is that our governments and our private sector have made significant investments in ICT in recent decades. But really, have the intended benefits been fully realized? Do we know? Can we show that they've been realized? Trinidad and Tobago has created well-regarded national ICT plans over the years, and we recall names like Fast Forward and Smart TT and the current Blueprint, for example. And our Ministry of Digital Transformation is again currently undertaking a special effort to assess our digital readiness as we forge forward towards digital transformation. The thing is, region-wide around the Caribbean, we still struggle to find the data we need to adequately inform our plans and even to assess our progress. And this is at various levels. For example, for national planning, where's the data for that? For network planning and management, for service resiliency and security, and so on. The CIGF last August noted the need for the Caribbean Internet Governance community to participate and for investments to continue to be made in ICT in both, I should say, public and private sectors. But we should be tracking and managing the improvements in efficiency, transparency, accountability, competitiveness, or expanded employment opportunities for citizens. And some of the questions or the factors or attributes that came out of the CIGF were, for example, keeping track of how many are connected, how many are not connected, and where are they? Who are these people who are connected or not connected? What's the quality of the connections? We hear new terms like meaningful connectivity, for example. What's the level of digital literacy? What are the factors impeding accelerated digital transformation? What's the value of the digital economy? Who's participating in the digital economy? How resilient are our networks, or how secure are our applications? How efficient is our regional internet and domestic traffic exchange? What's the level of investment in human capacity building? All of these areas came out of the discussion at the last CIGF. This morning, Minister Bacchus mentioned the government's 3 pillars of digital transformation in Trinidad and Tobago: digital society, digital economy, and digital government. And all of these would have success targets. And we must develop the metrics to measure, track, and drive our progress. Again, coming out of the CIGF came some comments. If Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean social and economic development is now inextricably linked to issues of internet access or affordability, quality, and resilience, as all of us are pursuing digital transformations, then we must invest the time, energy, and research efforts to ensure that we are making informed decisions and ensure that scarce resources are optimally focused to tackle development goals. We at the CTU, in fact, have noted this, and we've taken up the mantle in terms of reorganizing the Secretariat to include a division relating to research and measurements. And in 2022, part of our objectives include increasing the capacity of our CTU member states to use ICT indicators to monitor the performance of the ICT sector, monitoring and evaluation of policy implementation, outcomes and impacts, for example, and developing surveys and market research. So the hope is that the views expressed by our learned panel this morning would stimulate some constructive feedback from the forum participants towards our identifying and inspiring some effective follow-up actions. And to do this, we have a learned and diverse panel. And I'll introduce the panel participants. The first, Dr. Patrick Hossain. Patrick is currently the administrative and technical contact for the TT top-level domain. He is the CEO of the TTIGF, which basically runs the .TT. And he is a professor of computer science at the University of the West Indies. His present areas of, his current areas of research include applied data science, operations research and performance, and pricing optimization for cellular networks. Patrick holds like 41 granted patents in the area of telecommunications and wireless technologies. So he's the first panelist. Our next panelist is Mr. Niran Bihari. And Niran is a Caribbean technologist, researcher, project manager, and engineer. He's an entrepreneurial sort. He's the CEO of a multidisciplinary consultancy company, Proteus Technologies Limited, and is a standing board member of Kairos Capital Investments as a lead technology advisor. He's also chair, at least up to 2021, chair of the Internet Society Trinidad and Tobago chapter. Our third panelist is Dr. Kim Malaliu, and she is a senior lecturer and the leader of the Communication Systems Group in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. Kim is also an active researcher. She's the principal investigator of the Caribbean ICT research program there at the university. she's engaged in multidisciplinary action research on context-appropriate strategies for the purposeful application of information and communication technologies for the human good. She is also a very active participant in the work of the International Telecommunication Union, and this year there's going to be the World Telecommunications Development Conference, and she is Vice Chair on the Advisory Board of the Network of Women for this conference. And finally, in terms of the panel, we have Ms. Annie Baldeo, and she is the Executive Officer, Policy, Planning, and Economics at the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And she has a long-serving member of TAT. There she is responsible for policy development, statistical indicators, competition analysis, and strategic planning. And she contributes to the Trinidad and Tobago industry market reports. And she has also served in the ITU. Previously, she was a vice chair of the ITU's expert group on benchmarking telecommunications and ICT indicators. So I think we have quite a qualified panel to address the topic. The way we would proceed through the whole session is basically we'll get some initial statements from each of the panelists, and then that would be followed by maybe some sort of synthesizing discussion and comments and questions from the listening audience, and then we will wrap up to try to see if we could come up with any consensus points that we could identify for follow-up action. Before I get into any specific, before we get into these specific presentations though, after the introduction, I don't know if any of the panelists would want to say anything in terms of introductory remarks. No. All right, fine. So we get right into it. And I'll first ask Dr. Patrick Hussain to give his perspective on the topic, enhancing internet research, data, and measurement for development.
Thanks. Thanks, Nigel. And thanks to TTIGF for having this session on internet research. So I have a few thoughts on this issue. A lot of my present work is in data science, so it's application of various machine learning techniques to data, etc. But a lot of our work so far has been in industry. We would like to focus more on helping or solving societal problems as well using data science. And in order to do that, of course, we need data. And unfortunately, that seems to be lacking, as Nigel pointed out, in various areas. Now, in order to get data, there are different approaches. For instance, the cellular providers have a trove of data that could be used to investigate societal problems. But of course, there's the privacy issues, and we understand that they cannot disclose anything that is confidential. But of course, there are ways to work together with these different companies, not only telecoms, but even power, to be able to extract information at a high enough level that nothing is disclosed, no proprietary information or confidential information is disclosed, but at the same time, achieving some objective that we may have. Another potential way to collect the data is, of course, crowdsourcing, but that has issues as well. In particular, the quality of the data you collect. And that's another thing we've been looking at in terms of formation of a trust platform, where only people who are trusted, and there's a whole mechanism or framework behind that, are permitted to submit information to that crowdsourced platform. One thing we started several years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, is a platform for open data, data.tt, and another one, maps.tt, for spatial data. And again, you know, the intent was for people to provide data so it could be used for research. Unfortunately, there was not much, you know, very few people or organizations contributed. So participation in providing data is another issue. Surveys, you know, we take surveys to get information about the OnStar community. When I say OnStar, you know, we talk about unbanked, unserved, unconnected, etc. But surveys also have issues. You know, if they are long, people are hesitant to take them. If it's short, you collect insufficient data to act on it. If it has an incentive, it introduces bias, and the quality is questionable. So that's another area we've been looking at, in particular, looking at something we propose, a decision tree-based survey, where you limit the number of questions you ask, but you kind of focus on the specific pain point of the person or customer. We did this work for a telecom company and applied it as well. Now, given the data, you know, you have to identify the problems to be solved, and that's another issue. You know, matching the data with the problem. Typically, you can't come up with a problem and then search for data because the data wouldn't be there. So, you know, it's always better to start with data and see what problems can be solved with that data. And so we've been collaborating with NGOs, CSOs to solve societal problems. In particular, doing some work with the Cropper Foundation. Right now, the project with them is on agriculture, but we are working with them on some other projects where we will use data science to help CSOs, civil society organizations, help them collect data and then use that data to achieve some objective and make better decisions. There's other stuff we do, but you know, because of time, we wouldn't talk too much about it. In terms of data collection, we've done some work with looking at the QS per cost benefit of different ISPs. So we use our trusted framework that I mentioned before to collect that type of data. In terms of resilience, we've been looking at the issues of loss of connectivity to the rest of the world. If we lost a cable, for instance, you know, although we have an IXP, that would allow internal IP-based routing, but not, it may not allow us to do name server routing. In terms of cybersecurity, we've collected data using honeypots, etc. And that's a significant area we need to spend quite a bit of time on, because we are being attacked on a second by second basis for various reasons because of the oil industry, etc. And that's an issue we need to look at. So yeah, so that's my initial thoughts on this, and I look forward to participating and hearing from the other panelists. Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for those initial thoughts. And clearly, I mean, it shows the focus in terms of your research objectives and that sort of thing. So you've already mentioned certain challenges associated with collection of various data and areas where maybe we have options to try to develop data sources. You talked about cybersecurity, open data sources, quality of service, research, and so on. So it's very good. I think that it starts with a particular perspective, and I'm sure we'll get some others from the other panelists. So I'd now like to invite Mr. Niran Bihari to give his initial thoughts. Niran, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
So I believe that Patrick hit the nail on the head pretty much with his statement, with regards to open data, it's necessary that when you collect information, be it in measurement, you're trying to provide insight into what is happening on the network and gathering information. It can be, useful, from the Internet Society standpoint, we are more interested in the quality of service, who is getting access, what it mandates really being that in this present age, access to the internet is more or less a fundamental human right. If you do not have at least some level of access, that you're how to put it, you are denied a wide range of opportunities and information that is available. On the other side, of course, that by definition, the society also looks at internet shutdowns where in the cases of political unrest, the government or so on come in and purposely disrupting or shutting down the internet to prevent the descent or the spread of information in those scenarios, And so you always have a tricky balancing act when you're gathering this information because of transparency, internet service provider, you may not be able to access a site or a service, and that may or may not be intentional. So the elimination of false positives and transparency into the methodology and how information is being collected is very important. And globally, within some of the Internet Society's efforts, a lot of work has gone into collection methodology and trying to screen out some of those false positives, and determining where the problem actually lies. Is it at the ISP level? Is it intentional or unintentional? A very good example of this recently that we could use in our local context was, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago when Digicel had some issues with the DNS. And clients who were using Digicel's DNS could not access websites, they could not access Facebook, they could not even access WhatsApp. However, if you were using some of the open DNS providers, be it Cloudflare or Google, that bypass the local DNS, you had no issues. And so, interestingly enough, in my company, we provide service to quite a few health institutions, and when they were starting to have problems, we were able to switch them over to our network that runs actually on top of the internet because it's a software-defined network, and bypass all those issues for them, right? But you begin to think now how important it is, the internet now in our daily lives, not just because of the pandemic, but because of how everything is being integrated. That if you have a doctor who cannot get a lab result, or somebody comes in and they're trying to get information on that patient, a disruption in the internet or the network itself can be detrimental, life-threatening, and again, with everything being connected, resilience and so on is also a very big part of the Internet Society's overall goals and objectives. So it's very interesting because when you actually pull the global information database, there's almost no information except at a very high level generally. So this might be information that TAT would have collected, I guess, from the ISPs and so on. But there's no detailed granularity in that data that you can actually make decisions. So one of the challenges that the chapter has had in the past, and Kim might be aware of this, that when it comes to targeting our access programs, we cannot just go and say, okay, we know this community is not getting access because according to the ISPs, 98% of Trinidad is covered. That 2% is kind of vague. And then when you go on the ground and you start talking and you say, okay, according to Flow and according to Digicel, you guys have internet access, and the guy, and you go to the village and the guy says, well, yes, if you're 100 feet down the road, the fiber optic ends there. And if you're 100 feet up the road, I called Flow and they said, well, You can pay us $10,000 to run fiber to your house, you know, but 100 feet. You understand? And so targeting for us is tricky because you have, on one hand, you have the financial aspect of it that you try to build these things that make them self-sustainable. And, you know, you're going to put up money now to connect people. But at the same time, you know, you have the logistics of, well, okay, how do we get the most out of, you know, deployment of funds, whether it be, you know, from an NGO point of view or so on? How can we cover the most amount of people as efficiently as possible to provide access? So, you know, these are some of the talking points. And, you know, the interesting thing that I've found that, at least from some of my last, let's see, 6 or 7 years as vice chair and then as chair, and Jacqueline Morris being the incoming chair now, that as far as internet access goes, you know, it doesn't seem to be as gender-based as some people might think. You know, it's actually more along a class and income, you know, lines, you know, who can actually afford it, you know, and so you have people who can and who can't, you know, and you know, I do think that, you know, community networks and so on has a role to play in that regard, with regards to not just providing access, but providing a certain level of redundancy to the network itself. So I will close with that and keep it short and sweet because we don't want to, I'm looking forward to hearing the question and answer part of this,
right,
yeah, and the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Niran. And I think you identified the issue through your experience at ISOC, where you talked about targeting, how do you efficiently target your efforts, right? And the data isn't there for that. The granularity of the data isn't there for that. And you had that experience at ISOC, and people have that experience at various levels of the planning process. So various levels of planning. So government level, you know, the information they need to develop the appropriate policies, targeted policies, isn't there. We need to have it, and we need to develop it. We need to maintain it, and that's actually the crux of the matter. I think from the other two panelists, we'll be hearing a bit more about that as well. So I'll ask Dr. Kim Maladue now to take the floor and give her introductory thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I'm wondering if you can see my screen.
Yes, enhancing internet research, data and measurement for development, we are.
Excellent. So thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with old friends and new friends about enhancing internet research, data and measurement for development. I'm going to ground my thoughts in the development agenda of Trinidad and Tobago, most particularly looking at Vision 2030, or recognizing Vision 2030, which speaks to people, governance and service excellence, productivity, competitive businesses, environment, and socioeconomic development. And then recognizing also that Vision 2030 identifies ICT as a key enabler. And so moving to the National ICT Blueprint, which ends this year. There are many threads we can follow through Vision 2030 through to National ICT Blueprint. Just for today's consideration, let's look at the thread, people, empowered citizens, digital inclusion. And you can hear me okay, hear and see okay, Nigel?
Yes.
So, people, empowered citizens, digital inclusion. Let's look at that thread just for a few brief moments. Let me tell you, as a development focused engineer researcher, I need cross-reference and geo-reference data to contribute in multidimensional, dynamic, context-appropriate ways. Where the data doesn't exist, I'm happy to get it if I have the provisions to gather it or to measure it. Let me tell you the kinds of things that I'm interested in. And the I is the royal I, standing for the whole sort of development-focused engineering research community. I want, for example, population density, but I just don't want numbers. I want infrastructure overlaid with population density. Not only that, I want ICT infrastructure as well as different metrics. For example, Annie will speak about historically the digital availability index and the digital opportunity index. So this is the type of data that I want. I want to be able to see, to be able to contemplate what the problems are and a full range of multidimensional, context-appropriate solutions that for today, and then again, I want to repeat the process tomorrow. Because we are looking at the issue of digital inclusion and the provision of access to those who access, and accessibility, not just access, but accessibility to communities who are underserved. I am very interested in infrastructure type issues. So not only do I want to see these types of data mashed up and overlaid, I want them to be overlaid on maps that are not only georeferenced, but also have both topographic and morphological features. So I want, in fact, all of this. I want all of the data in the same spots in layers. So the thing is, when I look for data, as our colleagues have said, there is some data that is publicly available, some of which is current. Some data is publicly available but outdated. Some is only available to limited communities. Some is not available at all and not even measured. So, of course, ideally, what we're looking for is data that is publicly available and current. And when I say publicly available, I mean through open data, which we'll mention, and it has been mentioned, and I'll come back to the issue of open data. But I also need the data disaggregated. I understand Niran's position, but I want my data disaggregated by demography. I want it disaggregated by gender, by age, by abilities. I also want the data disaggregated by socioeconomic classification. And of course, as you know, I am very keen that this data is disaggregated geographically. Here are just some random examples of data that is needed for the contemplation of digital inclusion and solutions to address digital inclusion. Looking at things like ICT use, ICT usage, infrastructure availability, service availability, service affordability. Just a number of parameters and data examples that can fit on one slide. And you can see the variance in the availability and the disaggregation. Much of the data is simply not available in disaggregated, okay, by gender or by geography. Much of it is outdated. Some of it is not collected. Much of it is available, it exists, but not available publicly. Another issue that is a consideration for development-focused engineers and researchers is the issue of standards and measures. Annie, who follows me, will speak about the current digital inclusion indices that are in use, and perhaps she might mention the legacy ones that have fallen out of use. In the Vision 2030, you will see reference to GDP per capita, Network Readiness Index, Human Development Index, Global Competitive Index. GCI is a particular concern. An emerging measure is that developed by the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and that is a measure of internet affordability. The parameters that are used to estimate affordability from the A for AI measures include the ownership or access to a smartphone. We have data on the percentage of population who own a mobile phone, but not drilled down to smartphone, as I am aware. If AI seeks to understand the use of internet on a daily basis, I think that the closest measure that we have at hand publicly is the percentage of the population who are internet users. So you see, this nuanced, drilled down specificity is lacking at the time, to my knowledge. For AI, the use of internet from unlimited broadband connection at home, at school, at work. We can access data locally on the fixed broadband subscriptions. So you see, there's a need to measure. There is a significant, compelling need to start measuring internet use and usage. If AI talks of 4G connection, we have information, to my knowledge, on mobile internet penetration. So there are impact chains, yes. The government and all governments look to ultimate impacts, and they propose strategies that go backwards and start typically at the policy level. So the impact chain, for example, in digital inclusion, there is an impact chain that starts with policy and moves then to a set of specified targets, and then the development of a number of programs that set out to meet these targets. And these programs, of course, generate outputs and further down the road outcomes and ultimately impacts. Well, all of the processes in this chain, and each of the processes, of course, is multidimensional, but all of the processes in this chain are both consumers and generators of both information and data. Information and data is both made available and generated through repositories that include, that are accessible through desk research, that are accessible from respondents through a variety of different types of surveys and survey methodologies that Niran, for example, mentioned. Data and information is also very much, in principle, available through sharing. And I don't want you to forget that we're talking about internet research data and measurements, and the measurement of many different internet parameters that relate to use, usage, infrastructure capability, quality of service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This area of measurements is ripe for us to plunge into, and it's very, very critical that we have access to measured data. So I'm going to close with my recommendations. My recommendations are motivated by the following, or underpinned by the following principle, and that is no more institutions, no more institutions. Let us contemplate those response strategies, developmental strategies that are acutely resource-minded. Let us assume that we're operating in a low resource environment and contemplate those strategies that put to use those things that already exist. So I formulate my recommendations to you along 3 lines. One is synergies, another stewardship, and another standards. So, and I know that Nigel is going to stop me as soon as I have taken up my time. So synergies, where do I start? Well, I can start with the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, but not only the government as an entity, but the government as a set, a portfolio of multiple agencies. So synergies between these agencies and units, not only ministries, but also agencies, for example, TAT, IGov, TT, etc. And all of, and all, let me go on. Each of these is a conversation on its own. Synergies between GORT, the GORT units, universities, need I say, including the University of the West Indies, communities, as Nivan has mentioned. Not only communities, but community organizations, operators, all of the telcos and the ISPs. Let's not forget the development community, that development community that is chomping at the bit to participate. Development opportunities in development community wanting and ready to participate in software development, in hardware development, in systems development, in business models across the board. Also, our friends, very keen friends of the Caribbean are the internet organizations, the IORGs, but also the regional organizations such as the CGU, Canto, Caribnog, etc. Synergies. There are many expressions of interest and commitment amongst and within these organizations and communities that recognize the need for synergies. So let's just do it. And of course, we do it as a combination of bottom up, just do it, and top down approaches. These synergies, one of the key focal points for these synergies is action research, where we all bring together our best knowledge, skills, etc., resources to joint action research. The university is open and ready to participate. We have already made several overtures to our brothers and sisters in the wider community. I want to put a plug here, not only for formal collaboration and synergies, but for the very important and potent area of informal synergies. I think these are perhaps even more important than the formal ones. I also want to put a plug in for the regulatory environment and the innovations and foresight that organizations like the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago has not only had, but brought to fruition. Very recently, TAT has approved a regulatory sandbox, in particular to look at the issue of the development of homegrown wireless devices. You are familiar with some other regulatory sandboxes in the Caribbean around finance models, etc. Synergy is very important. Next, I want to turn my attention to stewardship. Stewardship is all about caring. Stewardship is about contributing because we share an interest and value in principles and community. There are existing multi-stakeholder groups. Again, I mentioned TAT. TAT has convened a number of multi-stakeholder groups. TAT is a telecommunications regulator in Trinidad and Tobago, and TAT simply cannot do its business. It cannot do its business properly were it not for rich stakeholder engagement, rich stakeholder feedback, and rich stakeholder collaboration. So for example, when I show you pictures and maps of communities that are underserved, and I call for the demographics and the topography and the topography and the morphology and the usage statistics, I also want everyone to understand that telecommunications infrastructure cannot exist in a vacuum. We rely on not only knowledge and data about the land and the roadways, we also need information and data about the power and many other data sources that are spread across multiple sectors. Multi-stakeholder groups are absolutely essential. Formal, yes, we can do it formally, but perhaps we can simply do it informally to get on with it, because we all recognize the shared need for collaboration. Voluntary codes, Canto has adopted some voluntary codes. Perhaps we can look to do the same thing within our country, within Trinidad and Tobago, amongst the ISPs and the telcos. There are some lovely examples that exist through the IXP, the whole development ecosystem of the IXPs locally and regionally. I want to really...
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes? I'll just... a big shout out for Fireside Chats. At the university, we run a series of Fireside Chats for students. And each Friday, 4 to 6, we bring in members of industry, of different industries and different sectors. Very pleased and grateful for Patrick Hussein, who joins us often, Nigel Casimir also, and all of the IORGs, many organizations. This is a time of volunteership where members or professional members of the sector come and speak with and share with students at the university. Through these synergies and stewardship exercises, it is critical that we develop standards, definitions, metrics, indices, indicators, open data and provenance, data sharing that is mindful of the sensitivities and the sensibilities of different sources. And I will close by recognizing the importance of coherence of all of these within organizations and in countries, and the harmonization of these across the Caribbean. So thank you very much for your time, and I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Kim, for that presentation. And I think it presented in a very logical and structured way the thoughts and the various levels that we've been talking about. I would like to pick up on the point you talked about, the synergies and the informal ones in particular. And I think the informal synergies or gatherings, multi-stakeholder type activities help to build trust between the various partners. And trust is what you need as a foundation to respect and eventually overcome the privacy issues or concerns that people might have with respect to data. So if it is that we can basically trust one another that we are collecting data for these specific purposes, for these specific objectives and so on, I think the cooperation and the data itself would be more forthcoming, more easily forthcoming. So thanks a lot for that. So we can get now to our fourth panelist to make our opening salvo. This is Ms. Annie Baldio of the Telecom Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. So Annie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nigel, and good morning again, everyone. As I begin, I want to echo the statements of my fellow panelists, and that is the importance of having access to data, not just from a regional point of view, but having data on a national basis. And as Dr. Malu just mentioned, the importance of having data on a disaggregated basis. So my presentation this morning, it looks at what we are doing at TAT to try and narrow this data gap that we see existing here in Trinidad and Tobago. So I just want to give a brief introduction. On TAT, we are the Telecoms Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and we were established in 2004 and governed by the Telecoms Act as an independent regulatory body responsible for the transformation and deregulation of the telecoms and broadcasting sectors. And when it comes to data, we at TAT, we recognize the pivotal role that data plays in helping us make decisions, and that's decisions related to investments, decisions that are related to policy development, decisions that are related to identifying the infrastructure projects that we need to roll out throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and even data on how we engage with our stakeholders. And for these reasons, we see the data that we have from the industry as being one of the key foundations that helps us in making our decisions. So at TAT, we have two main sources for the collection of data on a national scale. Firstly, we collect data using administrative statistics, and this is data that we collect from our local service providers in the industry. We collect data on the number of subscribers, we collect data on the revenues that are generated and the traffic that's generated on the networks and so on. And we use that data to inform our annual market reports and our quarterly market updates that are published and available to everyone on our website. In terms of who we collect the data from, so we collect data from the players both in the telecoms sector and the broadcasting sector. We collect data from all of the fixed voice players in the market, the mobile voice players, all of the internet service providers, those that are offering international voice services in the market. And on the broadcasting side, we collect data from the free-to-air markets, that's both the TV and the radio market, as well as the subscription TV market. And the next few slides just give a snapshot of some of the administrative statistics that we have published in our report. The last annual market report we would have done was for 2020. We are currently working on the market report for 2021. But as at the end of 2020, we had, in terms of gross revenues, the overall industry players generated around $4.7 billion TT dollars in revenue for the entire sector, with the internet market being the most lucrative. The internet market accommodated for around 45% of total revenues that's generated in the entire industry. The mobile market came second, generating just about 20% of the industry revenue. And when we look at it in terms of number of subscribers, the mobile market has dominated over the last few years and continues to dominate, with around 2 million subscribers being recorded. But what we are also seeing over the last few years, we are seeing both the fixed and the mobile internet market growing substantially. Over the last year, the fixed internet market grew by 11%, and we also saw the mobile internet market grow by about 18%, which is quite substantial for a one-year period. In terms of other second source of data for the authority, we use national surveys, which not only help us in measuring our digital divide and our digital inclusion within the country, but it also helps us compare our ICT progress on an international basis. And we use these two terms loosely, the digital divide and the digital inclusion. And when we use the term the digital divide, what we are talking about is the gap that currently exists between those persons who have access to ICTs and those persons that do not. And the gap can occur within and between different groups within your country and outside your country. So for example, we have population groups, we have persons with disabilities. Dr. Malu mentioned persons with different age groups, getting data for persons in different age groups, getting data for persons with different socioeconomic status and so on. And these persons may be excluded from having ICTs, and we want to be able to collect data from these type of population groups. We also have the digital divide occurring on a geographical level. So we can see the digital divide occurring amongst the municipalities you may have in your country, even the communities that you may have in your country. And lastly, digital divide can also occur amongst regions and countries where we see some countries are progressing at a faster rate when it comes to ICTs than other countries. And how do we go about measuring the digital divide? So the primary tool we use at TAT, we use the ICT Development Index. For short, we call it the IDI. And this tool was developed by the ITU, and it comprises of 11 main indicators that's used to measure ICT progress amongst countries. And this slide gives a snapshot of the main sub-indices within the IDI. So first sub-index we see it's the access index, and what this measures is the amount of subscribers we have within the country. In terms of ICT usage, the sub-index measures how much are people using ICTs in their daily life. And in terms of skills, the skill sub-index, what this measures is whether persons actually have the educational levels that are required in order to use ICTs. So that's the digital divide. When it comes to the digital inclusion, though, this goes a step beyond assessing the digital divide by considering factors necessary for citizens of a country to use ICTs effectively. And what this means, the digital inclusion, it measures do persons in your country actually have the skills they require to use ICTs? Are persons within your country motivated enough to be using ICTs? And do persons have the trust in the ICTs that are available to use it on a daily basis? And when we look at the statistics that we currently have for Trinidad and Tobago, what we see is that data for these type of statistics is greatly lacking. And it's for that reason that we decided to go about implementing or conducting a digital inclusion survey. Some of you may recognize this flyer. This is a flyer we had published in 2021, which we used to advertise the digital inclusion project. We actually started the fieldwork for the project back in March last year, March 2021. But because of the lockdown conditions with COVID, the survey was somewhat delayed, and we only resumed the fieldwork for the survey in September 2021. The fieldwork itself lasted around 3 months, and within those 3 months, we interviewed 6,000 plus households throughout both Trinidad and Tobago. And what's very important for us is not only was the head of the household interviewed, but also each member within that household was interviewed. So in total, we had around 18,000 interviews being conducted altogether. And what data did we want to see coming out of the survey? Well, we want to be able to measure the number of ICT users we have throughout Trinidad and Tobago. We want to be able to measure our digital divide using the IDI, not just on a national basis, but we want to be able to identify the IDI for all the different communities within Trinidad and Tobago. We want to be able to identify which are the unserved and the underserved communities we have throughout the country, and more importantly, identify the different population groups and the specific geographic areas that are at risk of being digitally excluded. And coming out of the results of the survey, we want to be able to prescribe recommendations on what we can actually do to close the digital divide. And how often do we usually conduct these type of national surveys? The last two surveys were done in 2007 and 2013, and we have recognized that there has been significant changes in market conditions as well as ICT connectivity and access. Therefore, it was important for us to collect more current data with what's happening with ICTs within the country. In order to collect the data, our primary survey instrument was the use of questionnaires, and the questionnaire, the core set of questions were derived from the ITU's model questionnaire for measuring access and use by households and individuals. And some of the questions that were included in the questionnaire, this is just a sample. The questionnaire had over, I think it was over 115 questions. In total, it took about 45 minutes per person to answer the questionnaire. But just an extract of some of the questions. Does your household have a television? Dr. Malu mentioned getting data on smartphones. Yes, we collect data from our service providers on a number of mobile subscribers, but we don't know whether the phone that they have is a smartphone or not. We collected data on whether the household actually had access to the internet. And if they did have access to the internet, how often did they use the internet within the last 3 months? In terms of the inclusion part of the survey, we asked questions about, do you trust the information that you receive from social media? Are you comfortable with conducting transactions online? Are you comfortable using your credit card online and so on? So that's just a snapshot of some of the questions we had in the questionnaire itself. So in terms of the next steps the field work for the survey has been completed. The analysis of the data is near completion. We are 95% completed with the analysis, and our aim is to have the report published as early as very early next month. And in us capturing this data, one of the most important points we wanted to bring across is that we wanted to make the raw data widely available for everybody's use. Dr. Balu mentioned open data. This is something that we want to support and start having data open and available for everybody to use. So in closing, in summary, those are two of the main tools we use for collecting data at TAT, and so that's the administrative statistics and that's our surveys, and we are hoping by continuing to use these tools will help lessen the data gap that exists on a national basis. Thank you very much, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Annie. I think that was quite instructive, and it would give Dr. Malalu some satisfaction to see some of the granularity that she is looking for, at least being addressed in this particular survey. But let me ask a further question, actually, and this is not necessarily only to Annie or Dr. Malalu, but to the whole panel. TAT is doing this survey, and they do it periodically. I would say that given the dynamism of the ICT market, that we probably have to find a way to do it more often than every, 6 or so years. But still, we welcome this. But is it all on TAT though? Where are there other institutions that could be providing the range and depth of data that we need for the particular purpose of this network planning? And immediately, like central statistical offices and so on come to mind. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on maybe some of the institutions that could be tasked with this type of work.
Nigel, maybe I can start off. One of the things I did not mention is that in conducting this digital inclusion survey, we have partnered with the Central Statistical Office so that the results we get from the survey, it would be recognized as national statistics that can be shared with international organizations. But in parallel to doing this exercise, we too recognize doing a survey like this every 6 years, it's not enough. The data becomes outdated so very quickly. So what we have been doing, we are currently working with the CSO in trying to include some ICT questions in there. I think it's called a continuous survey that they do every year. So we are looking to build some ICT questions into the CSO's continuous survey so that we can have more updated ICT data that we can share with the industry, at least on an annual basis.
Right. Indeed. Any other thoughts, folks?
I will just temporarily touch upon the Internet Society has a bunch of projects with regards to measuring the health of the Internet, right? One of the objectives of the Internet Society, or one of the wishes, we would like to see at least half the traffic, the local traffic pass through the IXP rather than leaving the country and coming back, because that would help optimize the bandwidth significantly. But apart from that, the chapter has ongoing pending project, I should say, that we're hoping to launch this year, where we are aiming to do real-time measuring using some network-attached probes and so on, to not just measure the bandwidth, but the quality of the service, in terms of identifying local disruptions. So is it when you have a disruption, or if you're paying for 100 meg, are you actually getting 100 megs? This kind of information, and feeding that into an open data dashboard eventually. Some of it will be hardware probe based, some of it will be software based. We're still working out some of the kinks in the platform. But this is one of those ongoing projects where we are aiming to build a framework, if you will, that multiple parties and players can come in, whether it be from business to government sectors, and tie everything in together, that all this data can be aggregated or disaggregated as, the user requires, because the data will not necessarily be tied specifically to any particular data set, and give better granularity so that when somebody comes and says, well, we're having issues in 5 Rivers, flow keeps dropping the connection, we could actually probably be able to look at the data and say, well, it seems as though they're having some problems with the network cable. And, this might be advantageous even to the service providers in some cases, because most of the time, they only know they have an issue when people start to complain.
Yeah.
Unless it's blatantly obvious, a truck come and cut the cable.
Indeed.
Yeah, let me say a few things, Nigel. I think the work that Tat is doing is fantastic. You get an understanding of the underserved and unserved. But of course, in time, hopefully, when the percentage of people online is sufficiently large, then I think electronic or online mechanisms would probably be much better because it'll be in real time and it'll be continuous, which is what we are focused on, doing more real-time analysis or real-time collection of data. For instance, Niran mentioned platforms for checking the quality, QoS of connections, etc. So we actually have such a platform that we developed a couple of years ago, where people would be able to determine basically bang for buck, how much are they actually achieving in terms of a bandwidth for the price they pay. So we actually take into account the pricing as well as the achieved rate. And we look at the achieved rate to the US as opposed to internally, because you can get very high internal throughput without, but when you start going to the outside, that's where the bottleneck exists, the actual connection to the internet, to the hop in Miami, for instance. So my feeling is, yes, we need to do things more quickly. It must be almost real time, but that requires, people to have online access. But so I agree, what Tat is doing is important, because right now we have a sufficiently large percentage of people offline. So you need to really go out to the community and check on those people. Yeah. So yeah, that's my contribution.
I can say, oh yeah, sorry, Niran, after you.
You're muted, Niran.
I just want to point out that because Nigel will notice that this was a topic of discussion in some of the regional groups, that other providers up and down the Caribbean, in St. Lucia and some other national regulatory committees are also looking at this in terms of real-time monitoring and so on. So we've gotten some feedback from some of those, with regards to implementing these kind of procedures, because, they see the value then of keeping the service providers, if you will, honest. And, coming from a non-governmental affiliated body like the society, I guess is, that we have no skin in the game either way. So, it helps in terms of being an independent body outside of the traditional aspect. To touch on Patrick's point, we do have a lot of people who are not connected. I did not touch upon that because that falls under technically a different category as far as the Internet Society is concerned, where we deal with community networking. And, the whole of one of the mission statements of the Internet Society is connecting the unconnected 2 billion plus people who don't have access to the internet, So that's part of the mandate. But, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback with regards to that real-time data collection. And, if Patrick is willing to share that platform and tools, I'd be more than happy to, collaborate on that, end.
Well, that's the informal synergies that Kim was talking about. Kim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to say I've been in extended conversations with ISOC about the probes. I'm very interested in us running the probes here But I just want to mention that I think it's very important to understand the methodologies and make sure that the methodologies are transferable. So for example, we are in discussions with an African group who is using the ISOC probes, and they're developing their methodology. And what we would like to do, and they've agreed, is that we can sort of be companions in this journey. While we localize for the Caribbean, we are also mindful of the correspondence between the measurements and the interpretation and analysis of measurements. Particularly in a region like Caribbean, where it is that measurements are made in one country, we really want the methodologies and tools to be transferable across, but across all countries easily. Yeah. But if I can also answer your question, your first question, which is other organizations.
Yes.
So one other category of organizations, of course, is the operators. Yeah, the operators, the ISPs, the telcos, etc. Of course, they have access to a lot of data, and one of my recommendations is that we have a forum in which we come together and we express the needs for data, the data that is needed, the nuances of the formats, and etc. of the data. And the telcos and ISPs can come to an agreement on what it is they are willing to share, where it is that they are not gathering the data, but they have the wherewithal to, they would agree to, and we take this conversation forward there. Another community that is very important in the sourcing of data is the community itself, the community of users. So I don't want us to think only of organizations, but also of users and communities. So I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to hand back over.
Yes. All right, thank you. I think at this point, I could probably refer to Dev to see if he could help me if there were any questions coming in from the audience. I wasn't able to follow while we were discussing. So Dev.
Thank you, Nigel. This is Devanansh. So yes, there's been several questions in both in our Zoom room and on our live stream on YouTube. So I'll start with some of the questions. So from Stephen Abhiraj, I've spent some time as a research national ICT policy, and one significant obstacle that I have faced is that government information resources become unavailable at their initial location. I believe that when a ministry that provides information changes name, its website also changes name, and the information resources become inaccessible from that location. How can this issue be eliminated? Shall I read all the questions, or?
Well, that's an interesting one. I don't know if we don't really have a government member on the panel, but you know, to answer that one, because that could have some implications related to internal government operations and inter-ministry data sharing and that sort of thing. So
okay, maybe
you could go ahead.
Okay, certainly. And well, I guess it's more of a comment from Shivam Tilak Singh. Some of what she is, what I believe is Professor Malalu is saying is that when we ask when the Shift Tech Foundation goes to these locations to do our free computer repairs, is what type of internet do you have? Do you have a smartphone? How much do you pay for internet and more? So on YouTube, the comment from Roger, question from Roger Chung, where are we on national security concerns on data privacy, data liability, data localization, domestic digital domain, taxation of services offered by international organizations, such as social media? Can we get our data from such a policy? And can this become an income generator? That's it.
Okay. I don't know if anyone has information on that and some of the national policies that might be existing with respect to with respect to data. From my interface in the CTU, one of the things we've been looking at is data privacy laws around the Caribbean. I know that Trinidad and Tobago recently did a consultancy because we had an opportunity to maybe consult on a draft or something of the sort, reviewing its data protection legislation. So I think quite soon there should be some legislation brought back to Parliament to update our current data privacy laws. There are existing laws that relate back to the early 2000s. Like the Consumer Misuse Act comes to mind, but I know that going forward, the plan definitely is to modernize those things. We've seen in the data protection, in fact, the European community's GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, becoming a kind of a de facto global standard. And in the updates that are being done around the world, and in fact here in the Caribbean as well, to those types of laws, tend to be using that as a kind of a minimum standard. So I think we'll be seeing that fairly shortly. As regards the part of the question about a revenue generating source or mechanism, I'm not quite sure. There might be opportunities there, but that's where the entrepreneurs come in with respect to building the digital economy and so on. Was that it for the time being there, or what?
Yes, this is Dave. Yes, those are all the questions so far.
Okay, and I see a comment coming in from Danny Jagannath saying that tomorrow's session on Internet and the law will address those issues some more. And in fact, there's a whole global forum called Internet and Jurisdiction that you can possibly look up that addresses data privacy type international standardization policies and so on. So all of that is in there. So we've talked and we've seen generally about well, both national level and network level type of statistics and data. Kim made mention that with respect to that, we could probably think of a forum for the operators that we can discuss what data they might be willing to put into the pot. She mentioned users as another possible source, and we've heard both Patrick and Niran talk about automating data coming from users as well, because as more and more people have devices and are online, we might be able to do some interactive sort of surveys with them that could generate good data. A question I would have in that respect, though, is how do we assure a certain legitimacy to the data that's collected under these circumstances, especially in some of the more automated, using some of the more automated modalities. Certainly some standards need to be established. We need to be able to benchmark and so on. So if even we get together in an informal way, how do we assure the legitimacy and reliability of the accuracy even of the data that might be forthcoming? Any thoughts you might have on how that could be controlled?
Yeah, I can just start off the conversation by saying that we have to start somewhere, and if we start by wanting everything, we won't start at all. I think the starting point is to start gathering the data, and in parallel that we continue the conversation about data provenance and the integrity of the probes. We do part of the issue of using probes is measurements of the integrity of the probes themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is, what I'm saying is that it is a chain, it is a whole chain. It's not simply an action of go measure. That's a very, I think that's a very narrow-minded view. It's not a matter of just go measure. It is a starting point is go measure, but understanding that to get it right, there is a process chain, and that will start with bringing together existing communities, because we have enough communities of like-minded citizens. Back over.
Yes. Yeah. So Nigel, I think I had mentioned early on that we've done some work on collecting quality data using a trust platform. So this platform, you kind of verify the provider of the data, etc., before you accept the data they provide. And in some cases, what we do is weighting. So you weight more trusted users more than less trusted users, etc. So I could share a paper we have on that whole issue. But for instance, we used that when we collected the ISP stuff I mentioned before. We wanted to ensure that people didn't provide fake information to boost certain providers, etc. So yeah, trust is important, and collecting quality data is important because, yeah, you can collect tons of data from crowdsourcing, but lots of it will be garbage. So yeah.
Indeed. Any further questions have come in as yet there?
David Antulaksing. No other questions so far.
Yeah, we probably have a bit of an esoteric topic here that maybe we need some specialists. So we have TAT collecting data. TAT is working with the CSO as might be required in order to ensure that the statistics that are collected, or the data that is collected, are recognized as national data and so on. So that's fine, and that's good for that particular purpose. At the network operations level now, we're talking about IXPs, and we've heard the internet organizations talk at the last CIGF, talking about taking some measurements, some network level measurements of the internet and its availability, its reliability, and data quantities, and all these sorts of things. Who would be, or who could be the repository for these types of data? We've heard some members of the panel talk about maybe creating some open data sources. Who might be some of the actors involved in creating some of these, keeping them current, and that sort?
Let me give you a pre-answer, and my pre-answer is a fundamental principle I think that is very important, Nigel, is to minimize the burden and the barriers. So if it is that the collection of this data is itself burdensome, then that is a barrier. So again, to start with, we need to have migratory paths. And I would say that those with most interest and those with most with responsibility, they come up with strategies to make the data available. So in other words, if organization A, I'm not calling any names or categories, organization A has a responsibility to deliver this data to organization B, then between them, they agree on the extent to which this data can be made publicly available, and one or other, whichever is easier, makes it available. This might sound terrible and very amorphous, but if it is that we at the beginning impose a very highly structured, procedural way of doing things, then again, we won't get any, we will be here 3 years from now with the same conversation. That's my pre-answer. Back over to those who will give you the real answer.
Well,
yeah. So Nigel, so you're talking about storage of open data?
Yes, I'm talking about open data.
Well,
and
yeah.
even a trusted source to keep it and make it available to people and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah. So I mean, as I mentioned, like 6 years ago, we started. We set up this platform, data.tt, on using the CCAN platform. And
now, when you say we, would that have been like the TTIGF people, or?
Yeah, this was mostly TTIGF, but together with people like Kim, etc. And we had some policies there about who can provide data. They had to be verified. So it was only, from respected institutions, etc. So we had a policy document as to what data will be accepted to the platform and how it will be used, etc. So I believe the government now has an open data platform as well, data.gov.tt. So that's another possibility of providing the data there. But wherever it is, as long as it's easy to access, it will be very useful. So,
right. Well, I guess the question is, if we're looking forward, and if we think this is a good idea, and we're looking forward to have it happen, who can we look to maybe try to pick it back up? Would that be, I don't know, TAT or the CCTLD or the university, or I'm trying to get. Well, what's coming to my mind is maybe a source that is outside of the hurly-burly of the commercial market. That maybe could be a means to carry it forward.
Nigel, all the data that the chapter collects and any in future initiatives, because of our chapter/global nature, will be shared in open data format on the global site and backed up on the global site as well as the local site, right? With regards to the methodology, we kind of go in with a hybrid trust and trustless system. So, for instance, I have been testing the probes with my corporate clients. We have about 2,000 something odd people in Trinidad and about another 3,000 outside of the Trinidad. And those are more or less trusted because we know the actors and we support their systems. So we actually know a lot more details. So those provide trust anchors, if you will. And then we can use that information essentially to build the trustless system now, where members of the public will just feed information to the system, and then you can do some statistical extrapolations based on, area and topography, network topography, and so on. Even to some degree weather conditions, because like in one case we actually found that when it rains for one bunch of clients in St. Lucia, when it rains, the network internet access in some areas just drop out. And that it was a weather related issue going into the repeaters and causing some issues.
All right.
So, it's quite interesting what disaggregated data can provide at times, in terms of trends analysis. So most probably we'll be going with like a hybrid approach with whatever we are looking to do. And I know that Shannon did mention some collaboration with Kim and Yui, forthcoming. So we're looking forward to that.
All right, very good.
Sorry.
Yeah, Kim, okay, very quickly. I was just going to ask.
Very quickly, then, thank you. Very quickly, it is just be mindful of the burden.
Yes.
If it is that those with the data agree through a code of conduct, if it is that those with the data or those who have data with the responsibility of sharing data, those are the ones who should reveal. And so back over to you. If I have final comment, I'll make it.
Yes, Dev, as we are kind of coming to the end of the time, I wonder if there's anything else you want to bring up from the chat?
Nigel, while we wait for them, I just wanted to mention the data that we collect at TAT So I mentioned we collect data on a quarterly basis from our service providers, and it's more along the lines of subscribers and revenues and ARPU and traffic data and so on. We publish we publish our data in our reports. However, what we publish is aggregated information. And the reason it's aggregated, it's to protect the confidentiality and proprietary information from the service providers themselves. But from listening to Patrick and to Nirad, there seems to be platforms already existing, open source type platforms already existing that we could come together somehow and be able to make this data as much as available to persons who want to use it. We really have a lot of data available at that. I mentioned the digital inclusion survey that we're doing now. We have data from the past digital divide surveys that we did. We have made that data available on our website as well. And the raw data that came out of those surveys we have available on our website. But that's how we are at. We try to make the data as open as possible and as available as possible. But I think it's important if we do come together as stakeholders and see what type of platform we can create so that can help share this data and put it to use. Persons out there, we need the data. I mean, this entire panel discussion was about the lack of data that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. So I think it's just having the data in one place so that it can be easily accessible by persons.
Yeah, Nigel, can I say something quickly? So I think it would be useful if we could sit down with the providers and discuss with them what other information they are willing to provide. So, for instance, Kim was talking about who has smartphones, who doesn't have smartphones. The operators know exactly what type of phone you have. All right, so they could provide that information. Of course, you don't need the it could be aggregated as well. It could say, well, 10% of the population has iPhones, et cetera, but it would be nice to sit down because they have lots and lots of information that would be useful. It would be nice to sit down with them and see what they are willing to provide and in what format.
So there we see some of the informal gatherings stemming from our discussion, and maybe that's an action point we could take forward to try to put together such a forum to stimulate sharing of data. Any specific points, Dev, from the chat before I kind of close?
Dave and Antilak thinking, well, there was a comment which I inserted in the chat was that that I think that the location data used by the multiple organizations in reporting the data should be standardized to allow for like the merging and mixing of data from multiple sources. Right. Otherwise, you're gonna have all this siloed information that we can't use effectively.
Yes, yes, indeed. Indeed. So I think that's a very good point for us to take forward. And I would basically, I think we're at the point now where I need to thank our panelists for the quite rich discussion, excuse me, over the past, about 90 minutes or so. On behalf of the TTIGF, I'd like to thank Dr. Patrick Hussain, Mr. Niran Bihari, Dr. Kim Malaliu, and Sani Baldeo for their time and their information this morning. I'm not sure, Dev, who I'm handing back over to at this point in time, but I think 11:45 is my time. I seem to be a couple of minutes over, but back to you.
Thank you. This is David Antilak speaking, and well, on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, that concludes our first day one of the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Governance Forum. I'd like to thank all of the panelists and moderators, and thanks to all the attendees, both in our Zoom room and watching on the live stream. And we hope to see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a very eventful day, second day, and you can go to igf.tt to see the agenda. And if you wish to let other people know about the IGF, please tell them to go to the igf.tt to get the registration link. I just wanted to also just thank our partners as well, TTIGF, ICANN, and the UN IGF for be partnering with us to make this possible. So with that, I would like to bid you all have a very good day. Stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.